Hey there, welcome to Broaderos. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe right away. If you end up not enjoying it, you can always take it back later. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Spirits from the war. Have you ever walked through a place that seemed ordinary, but deep inside, something told you it wasn't? Maybe you felt a chill, a sudden sense that you weren't alone, even though no one else was there. What if I told you that places remember the past, and sometimes the past isn't as silent as we think? It started on what seemed like an ordinary trip. I had never been one for history, but my friends convinced me to visit an old battlefield site, one that had seen one of the most brutal confrontations in the region's history. The tour was supposed to be educational, a glimpse into the past where lives were lost, strategies were formed, and wars were won. They said the tour was famous for its stories, tales of heroism, tragedy, and the scars that battles left behind. What they didn't tell us was that some scars run too deep to heal. We arrived at the battlefield on a warm autumn day. The sun was still high in the sky, casting long shadows across the open plains. The wind carried a slight chill, though it wasn't cold enough to make anyone uncomfortable. The tour guide, an elderly man with a gravelly voice, began recounting the history of the battle that had taken place over a century ago. His words flowed easily, as though he had told the story 1,000 times, but something in his voice hinted at more than just historical facts. There was something personal in the way he spoke, something haunted. As we moved through the site, I found myself lagging behind the group. Not on purpose, I was just lost in my thoughts. The landscape was beautiful in a melancholic sort of way. Rolling hills stretched out in every direction, dotted with small stone markers that signified where certain events had taken place during the battle. The grass was long and wild, waving gently in the wind, as if whispering secrets to anyone willing to listen. It was when we reached the old oak tree, the one that the guide said had been standing since the time of the battle, that I felt it for the first time. A strange sensation, like the air had shifted. The sun, which had been shining so brightly, seemed to dim, as though a cloud had passed overhead, but when I looked up, the sky was clear. I shook it off as just an overactive imagination. After all, we were standing in a place where thousands of men had fought and died. It wasn't unusual to feel uneasy. But then, I saw it. At first, it was just a flicker, something in the corner of my eye. A shadow, maybe? I turned quickly, but nothing was there. The others were still walking, listening to the guide's voice as he talked about the final moments of the battle where the soldiers had made their last desperate stand. I tried to focus on his words, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The tour continued, but I remained distracted. Every so often, I would catch a glimpse of something, an indistinct figure standing far off in the distance, always just at the edge of my vision. Each time I turned to look, it was gone, leaving me wondering if I had seen anything at all. My heart began to race, a cold sweat forming on the back of my neck. I tried to tell myself it was just nerves, that I was letting the history of the place get to me. But deep down, I knew it was something more. By the time we reached the memorial at the center of the field, the sun was starting to set. The sky had turned a deep orange, casting long shadows across the ground. The guide gathered us around the stone monument and began to tell the story of the final hours of the battle. His voice took on a somber tone as he described how the soldiers had known they were outnumbered, how they had fought bravely, knowing that most of them wouldn't survive. He spoke of their sacrifice, their courage, and the pain that lingered long after the fighting had stopped. And that's when I heard it. It was faint at first, barely more than a whisper. A low murmur, like the distant sound of voices carried on the wind. I looked around, wondering if anyone else had noticed, but the others seemed oblivious. They stood there, listening to the guide, their faces calm and focused. But I couldn't ignore it. The sound grew louder, more distinct. It was the sound of men, voices speaking in hushed tones, almost as if they were trying to be heard but couldn't quite break through. I stepped away from the group, following the sound, but I wasn't sure where it was coming from. The further I walked, the clearer it became. The voices were speaking in a language I couldn't understand, familiar yet foreign. My heart pounded in my chest, and my breath quickened. I knew I shouldn't wander off alone, but something was pulling me toward those voices. Something I couldn't resist. As I moved further away from the group, the sound grew louder until it was all I could hear. The wind had died down, and the air around me felt thick, almost oppressive. I reached the edge of a small clearing, where the grass was shorter and the ground seemed to sink slightly beneath my feet. I looked around, but no one was there. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing, dressed in a tattered military uniform. His back was turned to me, and his head was slightly bowed. I froze, my heart racing. I knew there was no reenactment planned for the tour, no actors hired to play soldiers from the past. And yet, there he was, silent, still, like a statue. I tried to call out to him, but my voice caught in my throat. I felt a chill run down my spine as I took a step forward, my legs trembling beneath me. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, staring off into the distance as if waiting for something or someone. "Sir?" I finally managed to whisper, though my voice sounded weak even to me. The figure didn't respond. I took another step, my feet feeling like they were sinking into the earth. The air around me seemed to thicken, the whispers growing louder now, almost deafening. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears as I reached out a trembling hand, inching closer to the figure. And then, he turned. As the figure turned, I felt my breath catch in my throat. His face, if you could call it that, was nothing like I had expected. His features were pale and hollow, as though he had been drained of life long ago. His eyes, sunken deep into his skull, locked onto mine with an intensity that sent a shockwave of fear through my body. But it wasn't just his appearance that terrified me. It was the look in his eyes, a look of unspeakable sorrow, as if he were burdened by something too great to bear, something that clung to him even in death. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at one another. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My legs felt like they had turned to stone, and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The whispers around me grew louder, swirling like a storm, though I still couldn't understand what they were saying. All I knew was that they were growing more urgent, more desperate. He took a step toward me. That was all it took for the paralysis to break. Without thinking, I stumbled backward, my mind screaming at me to run, but my feet barely able to obey. My body felt heavy, weighed down by the thick air around me. It was like trying to move through water, every step a struggle. The figure didn't stop. He moved slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving mine. I tripped on something, a root or a stone, I wasn't sure, and fell to the ground. My hands sank into the soft earth, and I scrambled to push myself back up, my heart racing faster than ever. But as I looked up, I saw that he had stopped, just a few feet away, standing at the edge of the clearing. His eyes, They weren't just filled with sorrow anymore. There was something else there now, something darker, more menacing. He raised one hand, his fingers trembling as they reached out toward me. The whispers around us turned into a cacophony, the voices blending into one overwhelming sound. It felt like they were inside my head, pulling at my thoughts, my emotions. I could feel the weight of their despair, their anger, and their pain. It was suffocating. I scrambled to my feet, the adrenaline finally kicking in as I turned and ran. I didn't care where I was going, I just needed to get away. The air seemed to thin out as I sprinted back toward the group, my legs burning with the effort. I glanced over my shoulder once, but the figure was gone. The clearing was empty, as if he had never been there at all. But I knew what I had seen. When I reached the others, they were still gathered around the memorial, completely unaware of what had just happened. I was out of breath, my heart still racing, and I could feel the sweat dripping down my face. My friends looked at me, confused. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, concern flickering in their eyes. I opened my mouth to respond, but I wasn't sure what to say. How could I explain what had just happened? How could I make sense of it myself? "I thought I saw someone," I finally managed to say, my voice shaky. The tour guide, who had been wrapping up his speech, turned to me with a knowing look. For the first time since we had arrived, I noticed a change in his expression. His eyes darkened, and a faint frown tugged at the corners of his lips. "You must have wandered too far," he said softly. "This place has a way of playing tricks on people." His words should have reassured me, but they didn't. There was something in his voice that made me think he knew more than he was letting on. The way he spoke, the look in his eyes, it was as if he had heard this story before, many times over. I wanted to ask him what he meant, to press him for details, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he quickly turned away, as if he didn't want to discuss it any further. Or maybe it was the lingering fear that whatever had happened to me wasn't over yet. The rest of the tour went by in a blur. I stayed close to the group, afraid to stray too far behind again. Every so often, I would glance around, half expecting to see that figure standing in the distance, watching me. But there was nothing. The whispers had faded, and the air had returned to its normal state, cool, crisp, and calm. By the time we reached the end of the tour, the sun had set completely, and the sky was a deep, inky blue. The guide bid us farewell, thanking us for visiting and reminding us to respect the past. His words felt heavier than they should have. As we left the battlefield, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was leaving something behind, or that something was following me. The figure's face, those hollow eyes, stayed with me, haunting my thoughts. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, trying to understand what I had seen. Had it been real? A hallucination brought on by the eerie atmosphere of the battlefield? Or was it something more? That night, as I lay in bed, the whispers returned. At first, they were faint, just a soft murmur in the distance, like the wind passing through the trees. But as the night went on, they grew louder, closer. I turned on the lights, hoping that would chase away the fear, but it didn't help. The whispers were inside my room now, swirling around me, filling the air with their incomprehensible words. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. The room felt colder than it should have, and I could see my breath in the dim light. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, hoping the screen's glow would bring some comfort. But as I fumbled with it, I heard something else. A footstep. Right outside my door. I froze, gripping my phone tightly, my mind racing with panic. I tried to convince myself that it was just the house settling, a creak in the floorboards, or maybe one of my friends getting up. But deep down, I knew better. The sound was too deliberate, too real. It was the unmistakable echo of a booted foot, stepping lightly but purposefully, just on the other side of my bedroom door. The whispers seemed to grow louder, surrounding me, making it impossible to think. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I stared at the door, half expecting it to swing open at any moment. I felt trapped, like a cornered animal with nowhere to go. The weight of the air pressed down on me again, that same suffocating heaviness I had felt in the clearing. Slowly, I got out of bed, my legs trembling beneath me. My hand reached for the doorknob, though every instinct in my body screamed at me not to. I had to see what was out there, had to confirm what I feared. With a shaky breath, I twisted the knob and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The soft glow from the nightlight at the end of the hall illuminated the space, casting long, eerie shadows along the floor. I stood there, staring at the empty corridor, my heart still pounding in my chest. There was no one there. No figure. No footsteps. But the whispers, they didn't stop. I stepped out into the hallway, feeling a chill as my bare feet touched the cold wooden floor. The air felt colder out here, more oppressive. I could still hear the faint murmur of voices, though they were harder to pin down now, as if they were coming from everywhere at once. My eyes darted around, searching for any sign of movement, but everything was still. I started to think that maybe I had imagined it all. That the fear and anxiety from earlier had followed me home, messing with my mind. After all, I had been through a lot that day. Maybe my nerves were just shot. I took a deep breath and closed the door behind me, telling myself it was over. But it wasn't. I barely made it back to my bed when the sound of footsteps returned, louder this time, more insistent. They were heavier, echoing through the hallway like a soldier's march. My blood ran cold as I realized that whatever it was, it hadn't left. It was still there, pacing outside my room, waiting. I grabbed my phone and fumbled for the flashlight, my hand shaking uncontrollably. The beam of light cut through the darkness, illuminating the door once more. I stared at it, waiting for something to happen, for the door to swing open or for the figure to appear again. But the footsteps stopped. And then, as if in response to my silent terror, there was a knock. 3 sharp raps, like knuckles tapping against the wood, reverberating through the stillness of the room. The sound sent a shockwave of fear through me, and I felt my throat tighten, unable to call out for help. Another knock. And then a voice, soft, raspy, barely a whisper. "Let me in." I felt my blood turn to ice. The voice was familiar, though distorted, as if it had traveled through time, through death itself, to reach me. It was the same voice I had heard in the clearing, the same one that belonged to the figure with the hollow eyes. My mind raced. This couldn't be real. It wasn't possible. And yet, there I was, staring at the door, listening to the voice of something that shouldn't exist. "Let me in," the voice repeated, more insistent this time, a low growl at the edges of the words. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't open the door, I wouldn't. But at the same time, I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't. My hand shook as I backed away from the door, my eyes wide with panic. The whispers were all around me now, louder than ever, filling my head with their incomprehensible language, drowning out my own thoughts. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the noise stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, frozen in place, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But the footsteps, the knocking, the voice, it was all gone. The hallway was still, the air no longer cold. It was as if whatever had been there had vanished, leaving nothing but the lingering sense of dread in its wake. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, the hollow eyes, the gaunt, lifeless features. I could still hear the voice, faint and distant, whispering in the back of my mind, urging me to open the door. The next morning, I told my friends what had happened. They laughed it off, of course. They thought I had let the battlefield tour get to me, that I was just spooked by the stories and the eerie atmosphere. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to think it was all just a bad dream. But deep down, I knew the truth. What I had seen, what I had heard, it wasn't just in my head. Over the next few days, things only got worse. The whispers followed me everywhere. At first, they were faint, just a soft murmur in the background, easily ignored. But as the days went on, they grew louder, more persistent. I heard them in the middle of the night, when I was alone in my room. I heard them while I was out with friends, even in crowded places. No matter where I went, they were always there, just out of reach, always whispering. And then, I started seeing him again. It would happen at random moments, when I was walking down the street, when I was sitting in a cafe, even when I was at work. I would catch a glimpse of him out of the corner of my eye, standing just at the edge of my vision. Always watching. Always waiting. Every time I turned to look, he would disappear, but the feeling of being watched never left. I tried to ignore it, tried to convince myself that I was just imagining things. But the more I ignored it, the worse it became. The whispers grew louder, more aggressive, and the sightings became more frequent. I could feel myself unraveling, my mind fraying at the edges. I knew I couldn't keep living like this. One night, about a week after the whispers had first started, I woke up to the sound of footsteps again. This time, they weren't outside my door. They were inside my room. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end as I realized I wasn't alone. My body froze in place, paralyzed with fear. I didn't dare move, didn't dare even breathe as the sound of those deliberate, heavy footsteps grew closer. My heart pounded in my chest, the sound almost deafening in the stillness of the room. I could feel it, whatever it was, standing over me. The air was thick with tension, and I could almost sense the weight of its gaze pressing down on me. My body trembled, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything, but I couldn't move. It was as if an invisible force was holding me in place, trapping me in my own bed. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping that whatever was there would just go away, that it would leave me alone. But then I felt it, the cold, icy touch of fingers brushing against my arm. The sensation sent a jolt of terror through me, and I let out an involuntary gasp. My eyes snapped open, and there, standing at the foot of my bed, was the figure from the battlefield. His hollow eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. He didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there, staring at me with that same expression of sorrow and anger. I couldn't take it anymore. I bolted upright, my heart racing, and scrambled out of bed. I nearly tripped over the covers in my panic as I rushed toward the door. But as I reached for the handle, I felt a sudden force pull me back. I was yanked away from the door, my body slamming against the wall with a force that knocked the breath out of me. The whispers were back, louder than ever, surrounding me in a deafening roar. I could feel them inside my head, pushing against my thoughts, trying to take control. My vision blurred, and for a moment, I thought I was going to pass out. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the force released me. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, my body trembling with fear. When I looked up, the figure was gone. but I knew he wasn't truly gone. This wasn't over. The following day, I decided to do something I should have done from the start. I went back to the battlefield. My friends thought I was crazy. They told me I needed to move on, to let it go. But I couldn't. I knew that whatever was happening to me was connected to that place, to the spirits that lingered there. If I had any hope of ending this nightmare, I needed to confront it. I arrived at the battlefield just as the sun was beginning to set. The place looked different at dusk, more sinister, more alive. The shadows seemed to stretch longer, the air colder, as if the land itself was waiting for something. I made my way back to the clearing where I had first seen the figure. The ground felt soft under my feet, and the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint echo of voices. My heart raced as I stepped into the clearing, my eyes scanning the area for any sign of movement. At first, it seemed empty, just as it had been during the day. But as the last rays of sunlight disappeared over the horizon, I felt it, the shift in the air, the oppressive weight of something unseen. The whispers returned, louder and more urgent than ever before. And then, he appeared. The figure stood at the edge of the clearing, just as he had before, his eyes locked onto mine. But this time, I didn't run. I couldn't. I had come here for answers, and I wasn't leaving until I got them. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, my voice trembling. "Why are you following me?" The figure didn't respond. He simply stared at me, his expression unreadable. The whispers grew louder, swirling around us like a storm. I could feel the weight of their emotions, fear, anger, sorrow, all pressing down on me, suffocating me. "Please," I begged, my voice barely above a whisper. "Just tell me what you want." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. And then, the figure slowly raised his hand, pointing to the ground in front of him. I followed his gesture, my eyes falling on a small patch of earth that seemed disturbed, as if something had been buried there. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. My hands trembled as I knelt down and began to dig. The soil was soft and loose, and it didn't take long before my fingers hit something hard. I pulled it from the earth, brushing away the dirt to reveal a small, weathered metal box. My hands shook as I opened the box, and inside, I found a collection of old photographs, letters, and a single medal, tarnished, but still recognizable. It was a soldier's medal, one awarded for bravery during battle. The letters were written in a shaky hand, the ink faded with age, but I could still make out the words. They were letters from a soldier to his family, telling them of the horrors he had witnessed on the battlefield, of the friends he had lost, and the guilt he carried with him for surviving when so many others hadn't. The last letter was dated just days before his death, and it was clear from his words that he knew he wouldn't make it home. As I read the final letter, I felt a deep sadness wash over me. This man, this spirit, had been trying to communicate with me all along. He wasn't trying to harm me. He just wanted someone to know his story, to remember him, and to understand the burden he had carried. Tears filled my eyes as I gently placed the letters and photographs back into the box. I looked up at the figure, and for the first time, I saw something different in his eyes. The anger and sorrow were still there, but they were softened now, replaced by something that looked almost like peace. "I'm sorry," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." The figure didn't say anything, but he slowly nodded, as if acknowledging my words. And then, just as silently as he had appeared, he began to fade. The whispers grew fainter, the air lighter, until finally, he was gone. For the first time in what felt like forever, the battlefield was quiet. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where he had been, my heart heavy with the weight of what I had learned. The spirits of the fallen soldiers, like him, were trapped here, bound to this place by the pain and trauma they had experienced. They weren't looking for revenge or to cause harm. They just wanted to be remembered. As I left the battlefield that night, I knew that the nightmares, the whispers, the sightings, they were over. But the memory of what I had experienced, of the soldier and his sorrow, would stay with me forever. The next few days passed in a haze. I felt lighter, almost liberated, but the weight of what I had learned lingered in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to honor the spirits, to do something that would ensure their stories were never forgotten. The world had moved on, but they were still trapped in the echoes of their past. I began to research the battlefield's history, poring over old records, newspapers, and photographs. I learned about the brave men who had fought and died there, the battles that had been waged, and the families left behind. Each story was a piece of the puzzle, a fragment of the lives that had been lost, and I became determined to bring those stories to light. I reached out to local historians and joined a community dedicated to preserving the history of the area. We began organizing a memorial event to honor the fallen soldiers, inviting families, historians, and even veterans to share their experiences. As the date drew closer, my anticipation mixed with a sense of dread. I hoped it would be a fitting tribute, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something still loomed in the shadows, waiting. On the night before the memorial, I returned to the battlefield. The air was crisp, the sky clear and bright with stars. I walked the familiar path to the clearing where I had unearthed the soldier's medal. The ground was calm, the whispers absent, but the atmosphere was charged, as if the very earth itself was holding its breath. I found the spot where I had dug up the box and knelt down, laying my hand on the cool soil. "I promise," I murmured, "I'll make sure your stories are told. I'll honor you and all the others who suffered." As I spoke, a gentle breeze swept through the clearing, rustling the leaves around me. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange sense of connection to the land, to the men who had fought here. But just as quickly, that comfort turned to dread. I felt it again, the weight of someone watching me. I turned, and there he was, the soldier in tattered uniform, standing in the shadows at the edge of the clearing. His eyes were hollow, but there was something different about him this time. He looked hopeful. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice trembling. But before I could say more, the air grew cold, and shadows began to gather around us. The whispers returned, a cacophony of sorrow and rage. I felt the atmosphere shift, becoming thick with tension. It was as if the very ground beneath me trembled with the unrest of those who had not found peace. I glanced around, my heart pounding. "What's happening?" I shouted, but the soldier only stared, his expression shifting to one of alarm. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into shapes, figures appearing from the darkness, each one a spirit trapped between worlds. They were the soldiers I had read about, their faces twisted in anguish, eyes wide with fear. They surrounded me, their voices rising in a chaotic din. "Help us," they cried, their voices blending into a haunting chorus. "We are forgotten." I staggered back, overwhelmed by their anguish. It was as if the battlefield itself had awakened, unleashing the sorrow of countless souls. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was rooted in place, unable to look away from their despair. The soldier stepped forward, placing a ghostly hand on my shoulder. "You can help them," he urged, his voice cutting through the noise. "But you must act quickly." "Help them how?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Bring them the closure they seek. They need to be remembered. They need their stories told. In that moment, clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about the memorial. It was about connecting the living with the dead, about giving these spirits a voice. I had to find a way to share their stories with the world, to ensure they wouldn't fade into obscurity. With renewed determination, I raised my voice above the clamor. I promise. I'll tell your stories. I won't let you be forgotten. The spirits paused, their eyes locking onto mine. The weight of their pain hung heavy in the air, but there was also a glimmer of hope. The whispers softened, becoming more like a breeze than a storm. Do it quickly, the soldier urged, his figure beginning to fade. Time is running out. And then they were gone, the clearing once again silent. I sank to my knees, breathless and trembling, but filled with purpose. I had a mission now, a calling. The next morning, I began to organize everything for the memorial event with a renewed sense of urgency. I spoke to the historians about gathering first-hand accounts from veterans and families, urging them to share their stories. I reached out to schools, inviting students to write essays or create art in honor of the soldiers. I wanted the community to participate, to connect with the past. As the event day approached, I could feel the excitement in the air. People were eager to share their stories, to remember. But I still couldn't shake the sense of unease that clung to me. The soldier's warning echoed in my mind, time was running out. When the day finally arrived, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the battlefield in a warm glow. Families, friends, and veterans gathered, some carrying photographs of loved ones, others clutching letters and medals. I stood at the edge of the clearing, my heart racing with anticipation. The event began with a moment of silence, a collective pause to honor the fallen. I could feel the weight of the atmosphere shift, as if the very land was listening, remembering. And then, one by one, people began to share their stories. As I listened, I felt a deep connection to each tale, each memory. Tears flowed freely, laughter mingled with sorrow, and I could sense the spirits surrounding us, drawn to the love and remembrance being offered. For the first time, I felt the weight of their anguish begin to lift, the atmosphere transforming into something almost sacred. But just as the mood shifted, I caught a glimpse of movement at the edge of the clearing. A figure appeared in the shadows, another soldier. He looked lost, disoriented, as if he were searching for something. My heart sank. Not again, I whispered, anxiety coursing through me. I turned back to the crowd, trying to stay focused on the stories being shared, but my gaze kept drifting back to the soldier. I could see his eyes, filled with desperation, as he scanned the faces around him. Suddenly, the crowd fell silent, and I felt a chill race down my spine. The whispers returned, rising to a fever pitch, filling the air with tension. I knew something was wrong. Stay together, I shouted, trying to maintain order, but the unease spread like wildfire. The spirits were restless, and I could feel their anger boiling beneath the surface. The soldier stepped forward, locking eyes with me, his expression pleading. I could see he was desperate for closure, for someone to acknowledge his pain. It was a reminder of why I was here, why I needed to keep going. In that moment, I realized what I had to do. I had to give them all a voice, to let them share their pain, their stories, and to confront the darkness that lingered. I stepped forward, raising my voice above the whispers. I know you're here. I shouted, my heart racing. I know you want to be remembered. Share your stories with us. We are listening. The soldier's eyes widened, and as if on cue, a wave of energy surged through the crowd. The spirits began to manifest, their figures shimmering in and out of focus. The whispers turned into words, frantic and desperate, echoing through the clearing. "I fought for my country," one voice cried. "I lost my brothers. I never got to say goodbye," another lamented. "I was taken too soon." As the spirits began to speak, I felt a rush of emotions, their grief, their anger, their love. It was overwhelming, but I stood firm, urging them on, encouraging them to share their stories. The crowd was captivated, their fear turning to empathy as they listened to the echoes of the past. I could feel the weight of the battlefield shifting, the darkness receding as the spirits found their voices. But then, just as quickly as it had started, the energy shifted again. I could see the soldier's face contort with anguish, as if he was battling against something unseen. The air grew thick, and I felt the shadows begin to close in once more. "Don't stop!" I shouted, my heart racing. "Keep sharing. They need to hear you." But the whispers grew louder, drowning out my words, the spirits' voices turning into a chaotic roar. Panic surged through the crowd, and I could feel their fear creeping back in. I looked to the soldier, desperate for guidance, but he was fading, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. "Stay strong." I urged him, but I knew it was a losing battle. The weight of their pain was too much. And then, as if the battlefield itself had made a choice, the ground trembled violently beneath our feet. I stumbled back, my heart racing, as the shadows erupted, swirling around us in a frenzied dance of despair. "Help us," the voices cried, the urgency palpable. "We need to be free." The soldier turned back to me, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "You have to finish this," he urged. "You're our only hope." In that moment, I understood. I had to give them a final farewell, a chance to let go. I stepped forward, raising my hands as I faced the spirits. "Your stories will live on," I promised, my voice breaking. "You are not forgotten. You are loved, and you deserve peace. Let go of your pain. It's time to move on." The spirits paused, their anguished faces shifting from despair to hope. I felt the energy around me change, the weight of their emotions lightening as they began to dissipate into the air, their voices echoing one last time. Thank you for remembering us." And then, as suddenly as they had come, they were gone, the battlefield falling into an almost serene silence. The shadows lifted, the air grew warm again, and I felt the weight of the world slide from my shoulders. The crowd stood in stunned silence, processing what had just occurred. I could feel their fear dissipating, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. Together, we had honored the fallen, given them the voice they had sought for so long. As I looked around at the faces of those who had gathered, I felt a deep connection to each person there. We had shared a profound experience, bridging the gap between the living and the dead. In that moment, I knew that the soldier's story, and the stories of all those who had fought and died, would never be forgotten. They would live on in our hearts, in our memories, and in the stories we would continue to tell. I took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill my lungs, and whispered a silent thank you to the soldier who had guided me through this journey. I was no longer afraid. I had found my purpose. Shadows in the forest. Have you ever had that unsettling feeling that someone is watching you, even when you're surrounded by friends? I remember the summer when I, along with a few close friends, decided to spend the day picnicking in the woods near our town. The sun was high in the sky, filtering through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. Everything felt perfect until it didn't. We set out early in the morning, laughter echoing through the trees as we carried our backpacks filled with sandwiches and drinks. The forest was a familiar place for us, a backdrop for countless adventures during our childhood. Yet, that day, something felt different. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a tension in the air that I couldn't shake off. As we found a clearing, we laid out our picnic blanket, the scent of fresh grass mingling with the aroma of food. We joked and chatted, but every so often, I glanced at the dense underbrush beyond our small oasis. The shadows seemed to flicker unnaturally, and I could swear I saw a shape dart between the trees. Each time I looked, though, there was nothing there, just the quiet whisper of the wind through the branches. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination playing tricks on me. After all, we were there to enjoy ourselves. But the feeling of being watched persisted, wrapping around me like a cold shroud. My friends were engrossed in their conversations, oblivious to my growing unease. I wanted to share my discomfort, but I didn't want to ruin the mood. "Let's explore a bit," I suggested, hoping to distract myself. My friends readily agreed, eager to stretch their legs after sitting for too long. We wandered deeper into the woods, the trees growing denser and the shadows darker. I felt a strange thrill in the air, as if the forest held secrets waiting to be uncovered. As we walked, I noticed how quickly the sunlight began to fade, swallowed by the thick canopy above. My heart raced as the darkness crept in, and with it came a sense of foreboding. The laughter that had once filled the air faded into awkward silence as we pushed deeper into the unknown. Each step seemed to echo in the stillness, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. "Did you hear that?" one of my friends suddenly whispered, his voice barely above a murmur. My heart skipped a beat as I strained to listen. A faint rustling echoed from the direction we had come, but when I turned, all I saw was the creeping shadow of the forest. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. "Probably just an animal," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. We pressed on, but the air felt heavy, filled with a tension that was impossible to ignore. It was as if the forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. My mind raced, conjuring images of things that could be hiding among the trees. As we ventured further, I caught sight of something moving, a dark shape flitting between the trees, just out of reach. My breath hitched in my throat, and I felt the need to turn back. "Maybe we should head back to the clearing," I suggested, my voice shaky. But my friends shrugged off my concerns, laughing and joking as if everything was fine. Little did they know, the shadows were growing longer, and the feeling of being watched was becoming unbearable. Something was out there, and it wasn't just my imagination. I could feel it in my bones, a primal instinct telling me to flee. But I stayed, driven by a mix of curiosity and fear, hoping to understand whatever was haunting the woods. We continued to wander, the shadows deepening around us. Each tree seemed to loom larger, and the forest felt alive, breathing in sync with my racing heart. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the path behind us remained empty, shrouded in mystery. Still, the sensation of eyes upon us lingered, pressing down on me like a weight. Suddenly, a chilling breeze swept through the trees, rustling the leaves and sending a shiver down my spine. The atmosphere shifted, and for the first time, my friends seemed to sense it too. Their laughter died down, replaced by a hesitant silence as we all glanced around, instinctively drawing closer together. "Let's go back," one of my friends finally said, his voice trembling slightly. I nodded in agreement, relief flooding through me. But as we turned to retrace our steps, a strange noise echoed through the forest, like a low whisper, just barely audible, yet chilling enough to make the hair on my arms stand on end. Did you hear that? I asked, my heart racing. The group paused, tension crackling in the air. We exchanged worried glances, our earlier bravado evaporating like mist in the morning sun. I felt the weight of the forest pressing down on us, a palpable fear settling in the pit of my stomach. Yes, another friend said, his face pale. Let's hurry back. We moved quickly, but the shadows seemed to stretch and warp around us, the trees closing in as if they were trying to hide us from whatever was lurking in the dark. As we hurried through the underbrush, the whispers grew louder, blending with the rustling of leaves. It felt as though the very forest was alive with secrets and unseen eyes watching our every move. I risked a glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see something emerge from the darkness, but there was nothing. Just as we broke free from the thicket and stepped back into the clearing, a sound pierced the air, a guttural growl that echoed through the trees. My heart dropped as panic surged through me. We were not alone. My heart thundered in my chest as we scrambled back to our picnic spot, the laughter and chatter from earlier replaced by breathless whispers and frantic glances. I could feel the heat of fear coursing through my veins, propelling me forward, urging me to escape the suffocating grasp of the forest. What was that? I gasped, trying to catch my breath as we reached the clearing. The sun was now a mere sliver in the sky, the encroaching shadows deepening around us. My friends stood huddled together, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. I don't know, one of them replied, his voice barely above a whisper. It sounded like something was out there. I scanned the tree line, feeling the weight of the shadows pressing in on us. The earlier thrill of adventure had vanished, replaced by a primal fear that clawed at my insides. We should leave, I urged, glancing over my shoulder as if expecting to see something emerge from the depths of the forest. But instead of packing up and heading back to our car, we lingered, drawn inexplicably to the encroaching darkness. The whispering wind played tricks on our minds, and the rustling leaves seemed to beckon us to stay just a little longer. It's probably nothing, another friend said, attempting to regain his composure. Just our imaginations. But even he couldn't hide the tremor in his voice. We reluctantly settled back onto the picnic blanket, but the atmosphere had changed. Every snap of a twig, every rustle in the bushes sent our hearts racing. I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, watching, waiting for the right moment. As darkness fell, the forest transformed. The trees loomed like sentinels, their gnarled branches stretching out like skeletal fingers. The last rays of sunlight disappeared, replaced by an inky blackness that felt suffocating. I shivered, my skin prickling with unease. Let's light a fire, I suggested, hoping to dispel the encroaching dread. My friends agreed, and we fumbled through our bags, gathering twigs and branches. As we lit the fire, its warm glow provided a small comfort against the encroaching darkness, but the flickering flames only amplified the shadows dancing around us. Do you guys believe in ghosts? I asked, trying to lighten the mood. It was a weak attempt, but laughter is often a shield against fear. They chuckled nervously, but I could see the anxiety etched on their faces. As the fire crackled, I caught a glimpse of movement in the trees. My breath hitched, and I turned to my friends, who were momentarily distracted by the fire. Did you see that? I pointed toward the tree line, my voice shaking slightly. What? One of my friends replied, squinting into the darkness. There's nothing there. But I knew what I saw, a fleeting shadow, darting behind a massive oak. My instincts screamed at me to take action, to leave, but the others were hesitant, unwilling to give in to the fear that hung in the air like a thick fog. Suddenly, a chill swept through the clearing, snuffing out the warmth of our fire. It flickered violently before settling into a dim glow. The air grew heavy, as if something oppressive was settling upon us. I felt my skin crawl, every instinct telling me that we were not alone. "We should really think about leaving," I said, urgency creeping into my voice. "Something feels wrong." The laughter that followed was forced, a thin veneer over the rising panic. My friends exchanged glances, and I could sense their apprehension. "Just a little longer," one of them pleaded, glancing at the fire. "It's just the dark playing tricks on us." But as the minutes passed, the feeling of unease only deepened. It was no longer just shadows in the forest. It felt like a presence, something watching, something hungry. The fire flickered again, casting eerie shapes against the trees, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being cornered. I stood up, trying to look brave. "I'm going to check it out," I said, pointing toward the darkness. "I'll just be a minute." "Are you crazy?" one of my friends exclaimed, grabbing my arm. "Don't go out there alone." But the urge to know what was lurking in the shadows was overwhelming. I pulled away from their grasp, moving toward the tree-line, the darkness swallowing me as I stepped beyond the reach of the firelight. "Just stay close," I called back, though the words felt hollow. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I ventured deeper into the woods, the sounds of my friends fading behind me. With each step, the shadows thickened, wrapping around me like a cloak. My heart raced, but curiosity propelled me forward. I strained my ears, trying to catch any sign of movement, any hint of what had stirred my fears. "Hello?" I called out tentatively, my voice echoing in the stillness. The only reply was the whisper of the wind through the branches, and I shivered as a cold breeze brushed past me. And then I saw it again, an outline, a shadow slipping between the trees. It was fleeting, but it was there. My pulse quickened, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through me. I followed it, stepping lightly, trying to keep quiet. But the deeper I went, the more the forest seemed to shift, as if it were alive. The shadows danced, and every sound felt amplified, echoing ominously in the silence. I turned back, wanting to return to the safety of my friends, but a sense of urgency gripped me. Suddenly, the shadow reappeared, larger this time, hovering just beyond my line of sight. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, the weight of fear crashing over me. I realized too late that I had wandered too far from the light, too far from my friends. I spun around, panic surging through me, and started to retrace my steps. But the forest felt different now, disorienting. The trees seemed to shift, the path disappearing as if I were walking in circles. My heart raced as I called out to my friends, my voice trembling. "Guys, where are you?" But there was no response, only the eerie silence of the woods surrounding me. The shadows closed in, and I felt the air grow heavy, thick with anticipation. The feeling of being watched intensified, and dread settled in my gut. I took off running, branches clawing at my arms, the underbrush cracking beneath my feet. The whispering winds turned into a cacophony, drowning out my thoughts. I had to find them. I had to escape whatever was lurking in the darkness. As I ran, a chill swept through the air, and I felt the unmistakable presence behind me, a shadow racing after me, just out of sight. My breath came in gasps, and I pushed myself harder, desperation fueling my flight. "Please, let me find them," I whispered, the fear wrapping around me like a vice. But the forest felt alive with malevolence, each shadow a reminder that I was not alone. Just as I thought I found the right path, a sudden silence fell. The forest held its breath, and I skidded to a halt. There was nothing but darkness and the heavy thrum of my heartbeat. And then I heard it again, the growl, low and guttural, reverberating through the trees. It was closer this time, a promise of something primal and hungry. "Run!" I screamed, my voice breaking as I turned to flee once more. I felt the presence lurking, the shadows reaching out to me, beckoning me deeper into the abyss. And in that moment, I knew we were not alone, and the forest would not let us go. My breath echoed in the stillness as I darted through the darkness, panic igniting every muscle in my body. The shadows seemed to reach out, fingers of night grasping at my clothes, pulling me back into their depths. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was hunting us was closing in, its presence palpable and suffocating. I stumbled forward, trying to remember the path we had taken. Each step felt like a plunge into uncertainty, the ground shifting beneath me. A low growl rippled through the air, vibrating in my chest. It was no longer just an echo, it felt like a warning. "Guys!" I shouted again, my voice cracking. Desperation clawed at my throat as I tried to force my way back toward the picnic site. But the forest felt like a labyrinth, its twisting paths playing tricks on my mind. I turned, frantically looking for any sign of my friends, my heart hammering like a drum in my ears. Then, through the thicket, I caught a glimpse of light, the faint glow of our campfire flickering in the distance. Hope surged within me, but the sound of rustling leaves behind me made my blood run cold. I whipped around, feeling a chill slide down my spine. It was there again, lurking just beyond the trees, a dark shape that slithered between the trunks. I took a hesitant step back, my instincts screaming at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. It was a battle between curiosity and terror, and in that moment, fear won. "Help! Please!" I called out one last time, my voice trembling with urgency. My eyes darted around, searching for any movement. But the only reply was the sinister rustling growing closer, an echo of something that didn't belong in this world. Suddenly, I turned and bolted toward the light, adrenaline surging through me like fire. I could feel the oppressive darkness closing in, and I pushed myself harder, branches slapping against my arms as I barreled through the underbrush. Each breath burned in my lungs, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't let whatever was chasing me win. When I finally burst through the last of the trees, I stumbled into the clearing, my heart racing as I scanned for my friends. The campfire flickered weakly, casting long shadows that danced across the ground. But they were gone. "Where are you?" I gasped, panic surging through me anew. I turned in frantic circles, searching for any sign of them. The fire crackled ominously, the light doing little to chase away the shadows that now felt like a living entity. I knelt beside the dying embers, desperately hoping to feel the warmth of my friends nearby, to hear their voices bringing me back to reality. But silence hung heavy in the air, a thick shroud that pressed down on me, suffocating my senses. And then, just beyond the firelight, I saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. My breath hitched as I squinted into the darkness. Was it one of my friends? Relief surged, but it was short-lived as the figure shifted, stepping out of the shadows, revealing itself in the dim light. It wasn't one of them. It was something else entirely, its form indistinct, shifting and writhing like smoke. A wave of dread washed over me, and I scrambled back, heart pounding as fear settled deep in my gut. "Who are you?" I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't respond, but I felt its gaze pierce through me, studying, waiting. The shadows behind it flickered, and for a moment I thought I saw faces, twisted in anguish, their mouths open in silent screams. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but my legs felt heavy, as if the very ground beneath me was dragging me down. The figure stepped closer, and the growl returned, low and menacing. I was frozen in place, caught in the grip of fear, my instinct screaming for me to flee. Run! Get away from it! I screamed to myself, finally breaking the paralysis that held me. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline pushing me forward. I turned and ran back into the trees, the flickering light of the fire fading behind me. The forest closed in again, the trees pressing tightly together as I plunged deeper into the dark. I couldn't hear anything but the pounding of my heart and the rustle of leaves as I dashed through the underbrush, branches scratching at my skin, but I didn't care. I had to find my friends. I had to escape this cursed place. After what felt like an eternity of running, I finally stumbled upon a small clearing, the moonlight filtering through the treetops. I skidded to a halt, gasping for breath, scanning the area for any sign of them. Guys! I called again, voice hoarse with desperation. But the only reply was the distant hoot of an owl, the forest seemingly empty. I felt a swell of despair, a weight settling on my chest as I realized how truly alone I was. I took a step forward, but then I heard it again, the low growl echoing through the trees. My blood turned to ice, and I felt the familiar sensation of being watched. I turned quickly, heart racing, but I was met with nothing but darkness. I was losing my grip on reality, my mind conjuring up the very fears I had tried to dismiss. Stay calm, I whispered to myself, trying to steady my breathing. You can find them. Just think. I had to be rational, panicking would only lead to trouble. But as I stood there, the feeling of dread wrapped tighter around me. I could sense the shadows shifting, almost alive, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I took a cautious step back, my instincts flaring. Whatever was in the forest with me was drawing nearer, its presence palpable. Suddenly, the bushes rustled, and I turned just in time to see a figure emerge, a silhouette against the backdrop of trees. Who's there? I called out, voice trembling. It took a step forward, and my heart dropped as the shadows pulled around it. The features were indistinguishable, melting into the darkness like ink in water. I could feel my breath quickening again as the realization struck me. It wasn't just the forest that was watching. Something was hiding in plain sight, disguised among the trees, waiting for the perfect moment. Guys! Is that you? I called out, my voice rising in pitch as I hoped against hope. But the figure remained silent, watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. And then it moved again, gliding toward me with a fluid grace that made my heart race in terror. I stepped back, heart pounding, as I stumbled upon a root and fell to the ground. The moment I hit the forest floor, the figure lunged, a shape too quick to comprehend, and the last thing I saw before everything went black was a flash of white, eyes glimmering in the darkness. I awoke to silence, the kind that wraps around you like a thick blanket, muffling all sound. My eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, I didn't remember where I was. The ground beneath me was cold and damp, and as I pushed myself up, I felt the soft brush of leaves against my fingertips. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my mind, and slowly began to piece together the fragments of the night. Panic surged through me as I realized I was alone. Guys! I shouted, my voice echoing into the stillness, but it was met with only the rustle of leaves swaying in the wind. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, scanning the dimly lit forest for any sign of my friends. Where are you? A chill crept into the air, causing me to shiver despite the warmth of the earlier afternoon. The shadows shifted around me, the trees looming like sentinels, their branches twisting into eerie shapes against the night sky. I took a cautious step forward, each movement echoing in the oppressive quiet. A sense of dread settled in the pit of my stomach. I could still feel the weight of the figure from before, its gaze burning into me even though it was gone. I had to find my friends, to ensure they were safe. Panic gripped me as I realized I hadn't heard from them since the moment everything had gone dark. "Please, answer me," I called again, this time my voice more frantic. The quiet was suffocating, and with every second that passed, I felt the darkness closing in. I started moving deeper into the woods, each step heavy with trepidation. As I walked, the branches seemed to reach out, clawing at my clothes and skin. I could hear the distant sound of rustling, as if something was moving just out of sight. My heart raced, each beat a reminder of my vulnerability. I paused, straining to listen, the sound of my own breathing loud in the stillness. Then, I heard it again, a low growl, a haunting sound that sent shivers down my spine. My body froze, instinct screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't just abandon my friends, I had to keep searching. I took a deep breath, attempting to steady myself, and moved cautiously in the direction of the sound. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, and with every crack of a twig underfoot, I felt the forest closing in around me. "Where are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. I pushed aside branches, peering into the shadows, searching for any signs of life. The growl returned, closer this time, and I felt the hairs on my neck stand on end. Then, just as I was about to turn back, I caught sight of a flicker of movement, a shadow flitting between the trees. My heart leaped with hope, and I quickened my pace. "Is that you?" I called out, desperate for a response. But instead of a familiar voice, I was met with an unsettling silence. The shadow paused, and for a moment, I thought I saw a face peering back at me, a fleeting glimpse of something almost human, yet not quite. My breath caught in my throat, and I hesitated. It darted deeper into the woods, and without thinking, I followed. My legs moved almost on their own, propelling me forward despite the primal instinct to flee. As I chased the figure, I felt the darkness gathering around me, thickening with each step. The growl resonated in the air again, a low rumble that reverberated through my chest. I felt like I was being hunted, the forest itself a predator, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. I had to keep going. I had to find my friends, to uncover the truth behind the shadows that haunted this place. As I pushed further into the trees, I began to see shapes moving in the corner of my vision, more shadows, darker than the night. They flickered and danced, teasing me, just out of reach. I squinted, trying to focus, but the more I concentrated, the more they seemed to blur and vanish. I stumbled into a small clearing, the moonlight breaking through the canopy and illuminating the ground. In the center stood an old, gnarled tree, its twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. Something about it sent a jolt of fear through me, but I couldn't look away. Suddenly, I heard laughter, soft, echoing, and haunting. It was not the laughter of my friends, but something darker, more sinister. I felt the chill crawl down my spine as I spun around, searching for the source. The shadows danced at the edge of my vision, but I couldn't see anyone. "Show yourself," I shouted, my voice cracking with fear. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. My heart raced as I took a hesitant step back, glancing at the darkened tree. A flicker of movement caught my eye, and I turned, but there was nothing there. Just the darkness, thick and oppressive. Then, I felt a cold breath against my neck, as if someone was standing right behind me. I whipped around, my pulse pounding in my ears, but again, there was nothing. Just the heavy silence of the forest, as if it were holding its breath. I stumbled back, my back hitting the rough bark of the ancient tree. Panic surged through me as I pressed against it, desperately trying to make sense of the confusion swirling in my mind. Where were my friends? What was happening? The shadows seemed to close in around me, wrapping tightly like a shroud. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to block out the fear, but the laughter echoed again, reverberating in my mind. Help! I cried out, my voice trembling. Where are you? And then, from the depths of the darkness, a voice answered, soft and chilling, we are here, always watching. I opened my eyes wide, dread flooding my veins. The shadows surged forward, a wave of darkness that swallowed the moonlight whole. I could feel their presence pressing down on me, suffocating, as I tried to fight against the overwhelming terror. In that moment, I realized this forest wasn't just a place, it was alive. It was a trap, a net woven from fear and despair. And I was ensnared in its grasp. My breath quickened, each inhale sharp and shallow as the shadows encroached upon me. I pressed my back against the gnarled tree, feeling the rough bark dig into my skin as if it were trying to anchor me to this reality. The laughter echoed again, surrounding me like a sinister symphony, each note a reminder that I was not alone in this dark abyss. Please, let me go! I screamed, desperation clawing at my throat. The shadows paused for a heartbeat, their movement almost hesitant, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw them retreat. But then, they surged forward, coalescing into a form that was both mesmerizing and horrifying. It twisted and writhed, dark tendrils spilling from the center, forming a figure that was vaguely human but impossibly distorted. Its eyes glowed with a malevolent light, piercing through the darkness, locking onto mine. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me, a mixture of fear and an unshakable feeling of being drawn in. Why do you fear us? It whispered, its voice a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. We are the guardians of this forest, the keepers of its secrets. Guardians? I managed to stammer, shaking my head as if I could dispel the nightmarish apparition before me. You're not guardians. You're monsters. A laugh rippled through the air, rich with amusement and malice. Monsters? No, we are merely reflections of what you fear, what you hide deep within your heart. With those words, the shadows shifted, swirling around me like a tempest. I tried to fight back, to break free, but every movement felt like wading through molasses. The figure loomed closer, its eyes burning brighter, and I felt a suffocating sense of dread enveloping me. Your friends, it said softly, they are part of this too. You cannot escape what you are bound to. Panic surged through me, and I turned, darting away from the tree. I had to find my friends. I couldn't let whatever this was take them. I pushed through the underbrush, branches clawing at my clothes as I stumbled blindly into the darkness. Help! I cried, my voice hoarse and filled with urgency. Where are you? But the forest remained silent, the trees towering over me like silent witnesses to my despair. I felt an icy finger trace down my spine as I caught glimpses of movement, shadows flitting at the edge of my vision, whispering secrets that sent a shiver of dread through me. I broke into a frantic run, each step sending adrenaline surging through my veins. I could feel the weight of the shadows pressing in, like a fog that clung to me, trying to pull me back. With every breath, I pushed myself harder, fueled by the need to find my friends, to escape this nightmare. As I stumbled through the trees, I caught sight of something glinting in the moonlight, a broken piece of glass. I bent down, the sharp edges glimmering like a beacon of hope in this dark abyss. It reminded me of my friends, of the laughter we shared just hours ago. I clutched it tightly, the cold surface grounding me momentarily. Think, I whispered to myself. Where would they go? Then it hit me. The old campsite, the clearing where we had set up our picnic earlier. It was a safe place, away from the darkness that now enveloped me. With renewed determination, I turned and raced toward the memories of laughter and warmth. But the shadows were relentless, darting through the trees, always just out of reach. I could hear their whispers, curling around my thoughts, sowing seeds of doubt. What if they're gone? What if you're all alone? I shook my head violently, trying to drown out the insidious thoughts. I had to believe that they were still out there, that they were waiting for me. With each step, I felt the forest shifting, the air growing heavier, and I stumbled into a familiar clearing. My heart dropped as I took in the scene before me. The picnic area was deserted, remnants of our day scattered across the ground, a blanket, an abandoned basket, but no sign of my friends. I felt the weight of despair settle over me like a shroud, the shadows closing in as I called out for them again. Please. If you're here, answer me. Silence answered back, thick and suffocating. Just when I thought hope was lost, a flicker of movement caught my eye near the edge of the clearing. I squinted, heart racing as I stepped closer. There, half hidden behind a tree, stood a figure. Mark! I exclaimed, rushing forward, relief flooding through me. But as I approached, the figure stepped into the moonlight, and my heart sank. It wasn't Mark. It was another shadow, distorted and ghastly, wearing a face that bore an uncanny resemblance to my friend. The laughter returned, echoing around me, and I staggered back, terror flooding my senses. No! I cried, shaking my head as panic gripped me again. This can't be happening. The figure grinned, a hollow expression that sent ice through my veins. Your friends are with us, trapped in the forest like you. You can't escape your fate. With a scream, I turned and ran again, the echo of their laughter following me like a curse. The shadows danced at the edges of my vision, mocking me, whispering promises of despair. I felt the ground shift beneath me, roots reaching up as if to ensnare me, to drag me down into the darkness. I stumbled, falling to my knees as the shadows surged around me. The air was thick with despair, and I could feel them closing in, their icy fingers brushing against my skin. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to shut out the terror, the realization that I might never escape. Stop! I shouted, forcing my voice to rise above the cacophony. Leave me alone. But the shadows only laughed, their voices swirling around me like a tempest. I was losing myself in the darkness, and the last flicker of hope began to fade. Then, through the haze of despair, I heard it, a distant, familiar voice calling my name. I opened my eyes, startled, straining to hear above the chaos. Could it be? Is anyone there? I cried, desperation clawing at my throat. And then, in that moment, I caught a glimpse of light breaking through the trees, a flicker of hope illuminating the darkness. It was a beacon, calling to me, promising safety amidst the chaos. With renewed determination, I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the shadows that clawed at my heels. I ran toward the light, fueled by the echoes of my friends' voices, the memory of laughter and warmth. I wouldn't give up. I would find them, no matter the cost. The light flickered like a distant star, guiding me through the choking darkness. As I sprinted toward it, My heart pounded in rhythm with my footsteps, the familiar sounds of the forest fading behind me. The shadows clung to my mind, whispering sweet lies, trying to seduce me into despair, but I pushed onward, refusing to be ensnared by their malevolence. Each step felt heavier as I approached the clearing, the light pulsating with a warmth that wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. "I'm coming!" I shouted, my voice breaking through the oppressive silence that had engulfed me. The light brightened, revealing the outline of a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. My heart surged with hope as I recognized the familiar shape. It was Sarah, her expression twisted with concern. "Sarah!" I cried, relief flooding my voice. "You're here!" She turned toward me, her face a mask of terror. "We need to go." "They're coming." "What do you mean? Where are the others?" I gasped, breathless from my frantic sprint. "They're lost in the woods. I can hear them, but they can't find their way back. We have to leave now." Her eyes darted behind me, fear etched across her features. Before I could respond, the shadows surged forward, breaking through the trees like a tide, consuming the clearing in an instant. I felt the air shift, heavy and suffocating, as they encroached upon us. "No!" I screamed, gripping Sarah's arm tightly. "We can't let them take us." But as I looked around, panic seeped in. The once familiar clearing was now a labyrinth of darkness. The shadows danced, twisting into grotesque forms, each one resembling a memory, a moment of joy twisted into something horrific. "Run!" Sarah shouted, breaking free from my grasp as she dashed toward the light. I followed closely, desperation driving me forward as the shadows chased us, their laughter echoing in the distance like a cruel reminder of our fate. The woods seemed to shift around us, branches clawing at our skin, the ground uneven and treacherous. I could hear whispers, my name echoing in a symphony of despair. They were calling me back, trying to draw me into their embrace. "Keep going," I urged Sarah, trying to drown out the noise. "We can't stop." But as we ran, I could see her faltering. The shadows were gaining on us, their presence suffocating. I grabbed her hand again, pulling her along, my heart racing as we neared the glimmer of light. "Just a little further," I shouted, my voice raw with effort. As we broke through the last line of trees, the light enveloped us completely. It was blinding, almost painful, but I felt the shadows retreating, their whispers fading into the background like a dying echo. We stumbled into the clearing, gasping for breath. The moon hung high above us, illuminating our surroundings, but the shadows lurked just beyond the edge, waiting for their chance to reclaim us. "Where are the others?" I panted, looking around frantically. "We can't leave them behind." "I don't know," Sarah replied, her eyes darting nervously. "I thought they were with you." Before I could respond, a chilling wind swept through the clearing, sending a shiver down my spine. The shadows pulsed at the edge of the light, their forms twisting and writhing, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "We have to do something," I exclaimed, panic rising within me. "We can't just leave them." "We can't go back in there," Sarah said, shaking her head. "It's too dangerous. We'll be lost like them." As her words sank in, a flicker of guilt gnawed at me. What if they were counting on us? What if we could save them? I clenched my fists, the decision weighing heavily on my heart. "We can't abandon them," I said firmly. "We have to at least try." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, but the shadows surged closer, their laughter echoing ominously around us. I felt the ground tremble beneath our feet as they advanced, a wall of darkness determined to consume us. Fine, she said reluctantly, determination replacing her fear. But we have to be quick. If we get caught. We won't, I interrupted, steeling myself. We'll find them and get out. Together. Taking a deep breath, we turned back toward the encroaching shadows. I could feel the weight of their presence, heavy and oppressive, but I pushed it aside. We had to go where they were, into the unknown. As we stepped back into the forest, the shadows shifted around us, their whispers growing louder, intertwining with our thoughts. I felt a sense of unease as I glanced at Sarah, but there was no turning back now. Can you hear them? I asked, trying to focus on the sounds around us. She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. It's like they're calling out. Then let's follow the voices, I suggested. Maybe they'll lead us to our friends. We moved deeper into the woods, the shadows swirling around us like a thick fog. The air grew heavy, thick with tension, and every rustle of leaves made my heart race. I could feel the darkness pressing in, and the whispers coiled around us, urging us to turn back, to succumb to the despair. But I pressed on, driven by the thought of my friends. We stumbled upon a familiar path, one we had taken earlier in the day, and hope flickered in my chest. This way, I urged, moving quickly. But as we ventured further, the voices grew louder, echoing through the trees. They were a cacophony of cries, pleas for help, desperate and heart-wrenching. I could feel my resolve wavering as the shadows closed in, and fear began to creep back into my heart. Keep going, I urged, glancing back at Sarah, whose expression mirrored my own fear. We pressed onward, the forest around us shifting and warping, twisting into something unrecognizable. My breath came in ragged gasps as we reached a small clearing. And there, standing in the center, were our friends, Mark, Lisa, and Ben, faces pale and eyes wide with fear. They looked lost, disoriented, as if the forest had drained the life from them. Help us, Mark cried, reaching out toward us. We can't find our way back. But as I stepped closer, the shadows surged forward, rising like a tidal wave, engulfing my friends in a swirling mass of darkness. Their cries echoed around us, filling the air with terror. No! I screamed, lunging forward, but the shadows enveloped me too, dragging me into their cold embrace. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my thoughts, promising despair and isolation. Together, I shouted, grasping Sarah's hand tightly as we stood on the edge of the clearing. We can fight this. We won't let them take us. But as the shadows encircled us, I felt the weight of their darkness crushing my resolve. I could see my friends' terrified faces, their forms twisting in agony as the shadows pulled them under. I turned to Sarah, panic flooding my senses. We have to do something. But the darkness pressed in, filling my vision until I could see nothing but shadow and despair. The last thing I heard was the haunting laughter echoing in the distance, and I felt my heart sink. Darkness enveloped us like a thick blanket, wrapping around my body, suffocating me with its weight. I felt a rush of despair as the laughter echoed in my ears, a cruel reminder of our isolation. I grasped Sarah's hand tighter, clinging to her warmth as the shadows swirled around us, whispering secrets that clawed at my sanity. Stay close, I shouted, my voice barely cutting through the din. I could feel the fear radiating from Sarah as the shadows pulsed with anticipation, eager to claim us. We stood in a small circle of light, the very ground beneath us trembling as the shadows writhed and danced. My heart raced, each beat echoing in my ears as I tried to focus, to remember what we were fighting against. We can't let them separate us, I urged, trying to drown out the whispers. We need to find a way out. But as I spoke, I felt the shadows shift, encroaching closer, their icy fingers brushing against my skin. I could see our friends in the distance, their faces twisted in agony, pleading for help. My heart ached at the sight, but I felt paralyzed, caught in a web of terror. Can you hear them? Sarah gasped, her voice trembling as she peered into the darkness. They're calling for us. Yeah, I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. But we have to stay focused. We can't let the fear take over. I looked at her, searching for the strength that I hoped we both possessed. We'll get them out. We just need to. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a grotesque form twisting and contorting as it stepped into the faint light. My stomach dropped, and my breath caught in my throat. It was an amalgamation of darkness, with hollow eyes that glowed like dying embers. Leave now, it hissed, its voice a chorus of tortured souls. This place is not for the living. I took a step back, my heart pounding in my chest. What do you want from us? I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. The figure laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Your fear nourishes us. Stay, and you will become one with the shadows. I could feel the shadows reaching for us, their fingers like icy tendrils wrapping around my ankles, trying to drag me down. Sarah, I cried, pulling her closer as we stumbled back, hearts racing. Fight it, she yelled, her voice steady despite the terror in her eyes. We can't give in. I turned to our friends, desperate to reach them. Mark, Lisa, Ben. I called out, my voice echoing in the stillness. We're here. We're going to get you out. But the shadows surged, swallowing the light, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. Join us, join us. I felt my resolve falter as the shadows tugged at my mind, planting seeds of doubt and despair. We can't. But then I remembered the bond we shared. The laughter, the memories, the countless adventures we had together. We've faced things before. We can do this. Together. I shouted, finding my strength. We are stronger than this. With that, I squeezed Sarah's hand, and we stepped forward, our feet finding purchase in the darkness. I could feel the shadows recoiling, their grip loosening as we advanced. Come on. I urged Sarah, my voice steady as we pushed against the tide. We can't let them win. The figure lurched forward, its hollow eyes blazing with rage. You cannot escape. You are mine. But as it lunged toward us, we took another step, pushing through the darkness, feeling the light beckoning us from beyond. I focused on our friends, on the faces I knew and loved, and the determination surged within me. Keep going. I shouted. We're almost there. The shadows shrieked, their voices merging into a cacophony of rage and despair, but we pressed onward, refusing to be ensnared. As we neared our friends, I felt the warmth of the light washing over me, pushing back the shadows. In one desperate lunge, I reached out, grabbing Mark's hand as Sarah took hold of Lisa's. The shadows roared in fury, swirling around us, but the light grew brighter, enveloping us in a cocoon of warmth. Hold on! I yelled, my heart racing as I felt the shadows clawing at my back. We're almost free. We surged forward, our feet pounding against the forest floor as we raced toward the clearing. I could hear the laughter fading, the whispers turning into cries of frustration as the light engulfed us completely. With one final push, We broke through the veil of shadows and into the clearing, the moonlight shining down on us like a beacon of hope. We collapsed onto the grass, panting and gasping for breath, the shadows retreating into the darkness, their laughter fading into silence. "We made it!" Sarah exclaimed, tears of relief streaming down her cheeks as she looked around at our friends. "We actually made it!" But as I looked around, my heart sank. The shadows may have retreated, but the weight of what we had experienced pressed down on me like a stone. I could still hear the echoes of their whispers, and I knew that they would haunt me forever. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice trembling. "We have to leave, now." Nodding, we scrambled to our feet, hearts racing as we began to move away from the clearing. But just as we turned to leave, I felt a chill in the air, a sudden drop in temperature that made my skin crawl. "No," I whispered, dread creeping back into my heart. As we turned, the shadows surged back, darker and more insistent than before. They rose from the ground, swarming around us like a living entity, their laughter echoing in the night. "Your souls are ours," they howled, the shadows coiling tighter around us. I could see the panic in my friends' eyes as they gripped each other, the realization hitting us all at once. The shadows weren't done with us yet. In that moment, everything shifted. The light that had once felt so safe began to flicker, shadows creeping into our hearts, feeding on our fear. The laughter echoed around us, a cruel reminder that no matter how hard we fought, we would never truly escape the darkness that lingered in the woods. And as we stood together, our hands clasped, I felt the weight of despair settle over us like a shroud. We may have made it out of the shadows once, but they would always be waiting, lurking just beyond the light. And in that chilling moment, as the laughter crescendoed and the shadows surged forward, I realized the truth: some darkness can never be escaped. The secret of the hotel. Have you ever felt an unsettling chill wash over you as you stepped into a place that seemed too quiet, too still? I have. It was during my solo trip to the countryside, seeking solace from the chaos of city life. As the sun began to set, I arrived at a remote hotel nestled between thick woods and rolling hills. The building stood tall and aged, its wooden frame weathered by time, but it had a charm that beckoned me closer. The moment I entered, the heavy wooden door creaked ominously, echoing through the nearly empty lobby. A faint smell of musk lingered in the air, mixed with the scent of old books. The receptionist, a thin woman with deep-set eyes, greeted me with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her gaze. "Welcome. We don't get many visitors this time of year," she said, her voice smooth yet tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Was it weariness or something deeper? I checked in and received a brass key marked with the number 2. "Your room is on the second floor, at the end of the hallway. Enjoy your stay," she said, the smile faltering slightly as she handed me the key. As I ascended the staircase, I felt the weight of the wooden steps beneath my feet, a reminder of the countless travelers who had passed through this very hotel. Each step echoed with a story, but I couldn't shake the feeling that some stories were better left untold. The dim light flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Reaching my room, I turned the key and pushed the door open. The room was quaint but sparsely furnished, just a bed, a dresser, and a single chair. A faded landscape painting hung crookedly above the bed, its colors muted with age. I placed my bag down and glanced around, noting how the air felt heavier in this confined space. After unpacking, I decided to explore the hotel a bit more. As I wandered the hallways, I couldn't help but notice the thick silence that enveloped everything. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stumbled upon a small lounge area, filled with old furniture that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Dust particles floated in the air, glinting in the dim light, and an old record player sat silently in the corner as if waiting for someone to bring it back to life. That's when I heard it, the faintest whisper, like a soft breath against my ear. "Get out," it seemed to say, but when I turned around, no one was there. I laughed nervously, shaking my head at my imagination. Surely, it was just my mind playing tricks on me, conjuring shadows where there were none. But a shiver ran down my spine, and I decided it was best to return to my room. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I pulled the covers tightly around me, my heart racing with every creak of the old building. The silence felt alive, a palpable entity that pressed in around me. I closed my eyes, trying to will myself to sleep, but sleep refused to come. Hours later, I was jolted awake by a sound. A soft knock echoed through the room, followed by a whisper that seemed to seep through the walls. "Help me." I sat up, my heart pounding as I strained to listen. Was it just my imagination, or was someone truly out there? I got out of bed, the floor cold against my feet, and approached the door. The handle felt cool in my palm, and for a moment, I hesitated. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door slowly, peering into the darkened hallway. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, and the faint glow of a flickering light bulb hung overhead, casting shadows that twisted and turned. I stepped out cautiously, my instincts screaming for me to retreat. "Hello?" I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. There was no response, just the echo of my own words bouncing back at me. The hotel felt more alive than before, its history seeping into my consciousness. I moved forward, each step echoing in the stillness, the hair on the back of my neck prickling. And that's when I saw it, a shadow darting between the doors down the hallway. My heart raced as I instinctively followed it, drawn by a mix of curiosity and fear. But as I approached the door it had disappeared into, I stopped short, my pulse pounding in my ears. The door was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness gaping before me. I hesitated, my mind racing with questions. What if this was the room of a former guest? What if they had disappeared just like the whispers suggested? With my heart in my throat, I pushed the door open wider and stepped inside. The room was empty, but the air felt charged, thick with a presence that sent chills down my spine. I could feel the weight of something hidden in the shadows, lurking just beyond my vision. My instincts screamed for me to leave, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to uncover something here. Then, in the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something, a flicker of movement near the window. I turned quickly, my breath catching in my throat, but all I saw was the drapes fluttering slightly as if a breeze had just passed through. But I was certain I had seen something. Something that didn't belong. I backed away, ready to flee back to the safety of my room when suddenly the door slammed shut behind me. Panic surged through me as I turned to face it, my heart racing. I pounded on the door, desperation clawing at my throat. "Let me out. Please." I shouted, but my voice felt small and insignificant in the vast silence of the hotel. With trembling hands, I grasped the doorknob, twisting it violently, but it wouldn't budge. I was trapped. My heart thundered in my chest as I pressed my back against the wall, searching for a way out. The darkness felt thick and suffocating, wrapping around me like a shroud. I could hear my own breath echoing in the silence, a constant reminder of my growing fear. I began to feel the walls closing in, and panic threatened to overwhelm me. "Help me," the whisper returned, more insistent this time, reverberating in the empty room. I looked around frantically, hoping to find something, anything, that could explain what was happening. The air was charged with an energy I couldn't understand, like the moment before a storm breaks. In the dim light, I noticed the dresser in the corner, its surface cluttered with old knickknacks. I stumbled over to it, my fingers trembling as I brushed away the dust. My heart sank as I picked up a small, cracked mirror. The surface was tarnished, but as I held it up, I could see my reflection distorted in the glass. Behind me, the shadows seemed to shift, and I felt a cold breath on my neck, sending shivers racing down my spine. I spun around, expecting to see someone standing there, but the room was empty. "Get out," the voice hissed again, more urgent, and I could feel the air growing colder. I dropped the mirror, watching as it shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, scattering across the floor like a constellation of despair. I banged on the door again, desperation fueling my strength. "Let me out. Please." The silence answered back, heavy and oppressive, as though the hotel itself was listening, judging. Suddenly, the door swung open, and I stumbled forward, nearly falling into the hallway. I rushed back to my room, slamming the door behind me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I leaned against it, my heart racing with fear. I was safe, for the moment, but I knew that whatever was in this place was not done with me. I glanced at the brass key still hanging from my wrist and felt a sense of dread settle over me. The next day, I decided to stay close to my room, hoping to avoid any further encounters. I spent hours reading a book, trying to distract myself from the unsettling feelings that clung to me like a shadow. But every creak of the floorboards made me jump, and every gust of wind that rattled the windows sent chills through my body. At breakfast, I met another guest, an elderly man who sat alone at a table in the corner of the dining room. He had a distant look in his eyes, as if he had seen too much in his lifetime. When I approached him, he regarded me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Are you new here?" he asked, his voice gravelly, as he sipped his coffee. "Yes, just arrived yesterday," I replied, forcing a smile. "What's it like here?" He paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "This place has a history," he said slowly. "Many come to stay, but few leave unchanged." His eyes drifted to the window, staring at something only he could see. "What do you mean?" I pressed, a knot tightening in my stomach. "There are stories," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "People disappear, just like that. One moment they're here, and the next, they're gone." He leaned in closer, his eyes locking onto mine. "You must be careful. This hotel, it knows things." I felt a chill creep down my spine, and I glanced around, half expecting the shadows to spring to life. "What happened to them?" I managed to ask, my voice trembling. He shrugged, a resigned expression crossing his face. "No one really knows. Some say they're taken by the hotel itself, while others believe it's something more sinister. Just be careful, young one. You might not like what you find." I thanked him and returned to my room, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my gut. The stories of disappearing guests lingered in my mind like a haunting melody. Could I really trust the old man's words? I had to find out for myself. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a familiar pull to explore the hotel once more. This time, I wouldn't let fear paralyze me. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped into the hallway, the beam cutting through the darkness as I ventured deeper into the building. With each step, the air grew heavier, the silence more profound. I began checking the doors along the corridor, peering through the small windows. Most were dark and empty, but one caught my attention. The door was slightly ajar, an invitation, or perhaps a warning. I pushed it open and stepped inside, the beam of my flashlight illuminating the room. It was a small parlor filled with dusty furniture and framed photographs that lined the walls. As I examined them, I felt a sense of familiarity wash over me. The faces were obscured by dust, but they seemed to whisper secrets of lives once lived. Then, my gaze fell upon one photograph that froze my breath in my throat. It was a group of people standing outside the hotel, smiling as if they had just enjoyed a lovely evening. But there was something wrong. There were too many faces. I felt a jolt of recognition. Among them was the elderly man I had spoken to earlier. My heart raced. How could this be? I looked closer, squinting at the details, and that's when I saw it. In the background, just beyond the group, was a figure, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to loom over them, watching. My skin crawled as I traced the outline with my finger, a sense of dread consuming me. I backed away slowly, but as I turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind me, trapping me in darkness. Panic surged through me, and I pounded on the door, shouting for help. But no one answered. The walls echoed with my cries, the silence thickening around me like a fog. As I struggled against the door, the whisper returned, now a cacophony of voices. "Stay, join us," they beckoned, each syllable sending chills down my spine. I could feel the temperature drop, the air growing thick with a presence that suffocated me. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just in a hotel. I was in a web of stories woven with the threads of lost souls. The weight of their fate pressed down on me, and I could feel my own sanity slipping away. Desperation fueled my strength, and with one final push, I hurled myself against the door. It burst open, and I tumbled into the hallway, gasping for breath. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, and sprinted back to my room, slamming the door shut behind me. As I leaned against it, trembling, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hotel had taken a piece of me. I was forever altered by what I had witnessed, and I could sense that the shadows were only beginning to stir. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, the weight of the hotel's history pressing down like a suffocating blanket. The shadows danced on the walls, twisting and shifting with the dim light from the window. I could still hear the whispers, echoing in my mind, urging me to join them, to become part of their forgotten tales. I pulled the covers tighter around me, but it did little to shield me from the creeping dread. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting it to swing open and reveal whatever horrors lay beyond. Hours ticked by, the silence growing louder, until I finally drifted into a restless slumber filled with nightmares of dark figures and endless corridors. When morning finally came, I woke to the sound of something tapping against my window. My heart raced as I sat up, scanning the room. The light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows that flickered and shifted, but the tapping persisted. I cautiously approached the window, drawing back the curtain to reveal a thick layer of fog enveloping the grounds outside. The landscape was transformed, everything muted and obscured, as if the hotel was hiding its secrets. I felt a chill run down my spine as I remembered the old man's warning. You might not like what you find. But curiosity gnawed at me, urging me to venture outside to uncover the truth. I dressed quickly, trying to shake off the unease that clung to me like a second skin. As I stepped outside, the cold air wrapped around me, and I hesitated at the threshold. The fog swirled, and I took a deep breath, stepping into the unknown. I wandered through the hotel grounds, the mist curling around my legs like tendrils. The world felt surreal, as if I had stepped into a dream that was just slightly off-kilter. I could barely see the path before me, and every step felt heavy with foreboding. Suddenly, I noticed something glinting in the distance, barely visible through the fog. I followed the glimmer, my heart racing with a mix of fear and intrigue. As I got closer, I saw that it was a small, ornate gate, partially hidden by overgrown vines. The gate was old, its iron bars twisted and rusted, but there was a sense of allure to it, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. I pushed it open, the hinges creaking in protest, and stepped into a small garden that had long been abandoned. Weeds thrived in every corner, and the air felt heavy with the weight of memories. In the center stood a stone fountain, dry and cracked, its surface coated with dust. I felt an inexplicable pull towards it. As I approached the fountain, I noticed a figure carved into the stone, a woman with hollow eyes and a sorrowful expression. I reached out to touch the cool surface, and the moment my fingers brushed against the stone, a shiver coursed through me. I was overwhelmed by a sense of loss and longing, as if the woman was crying out for something. Suddenly, the air shifted, and I heard the whispers again, clearer now. "Help us," they pleaded. My heart raced as I looked around, half expecting to see the source of the voices. The fog thickened, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I saw shadows flitting just beyond my vision, glimpses of figures trapped in this forgotten place. I stepped back, a wave of panic rising in my throat. I needed to leave this garden. As I turned to retrace my steps, the fog closed in around me, the path obscured. My heart pounded as I stumbled, desperately trying to find my way back to the hotel. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, echoing through the mist. "Stay, stay with us." I could feel their presence surrounding me, pressing in from all sides. I ran, my breath coming in sharp gasps, the fog swirling like a living entity. Finally, I broke free from the fog, bursting back onto the hotel grounds. I stumbled toward the entrance, adrenaline surging through me. As I reached for the door, I glanced back, half expecting to see the figures emerge from the mist, but the garden stood silent, shrouded in fog once more. I locked the door behind me, leaning against it as I tried to catch my breath. I could still hear the whispers in my mind, a haunting melody that refused to fade. I needed to know more about this hotel and its dark history. Later that evening, I sought out the elderly man again, hoping to find answers. I found him sitting in the dimly lit lounge, nursing a drink. He looked up as I approached, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You were right," I said, my voice trembling. "What's happening here? What happened to the guests?" He sighed, a look of sorrow crossing his face. "Many have come and gone. Some leave willingly, while others, they are never seen again. The hotel feeds on fear, on the memories of those who enter. It keeps their souls trapped, echoes of their lives lingering in the shadows." I felt a chill creep up my spine. But how do I escape? How do I break free from this place? He leaned in closer, his expression grave. "You must confront the darkness. Face whatever it is that binds you here. Only then can you hope to break the cycle. But be warned, the truth may be more horrifying than you can imagine." I left him with a heavy heart, the weight of his words settling in my mind. I knew I had to confront whatever malevolence lurked in the shadows of the hotel. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices urging me to uncover the truth, even as fear clawed at my insides. That night, I prepared myself. I gathered what little courage I had left, and as the clock struck midnight, I ventured out once more. I felt the pull of the garden, the memories of the trapped souls urging me to return. As I stepped into the mist once again, the air crackled with tension. The whispers surrounded me, wrapping around me like a shroud. I pressed forward, determination surging through me as I sought the fountain, the key to unraveling the hotel's secrets. When I reached the garden, The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. The woman's statue loomed before me, her hollow eyes seeming to plead for help. I reached out to her, my fingers brushing against the stone once more. "Who are you?" I whispered, desperation clawing at my throat. "What do you want from me?" The whispers surged, a whirlwind of voices rising in volume. "Help us, set us free," they beckoned, their longing palpable. And then it happened. The fog lifted slightly, revealing the outlines of figures trapped within the shadows, their faces twisted in anguish. I gasped, my heart racing. They were the souls of the guests, lost and forgotten, pleading for release. "Please!" I cried out, my voice trembling with fear and determination. "How can I help you?" In that moment, the air grew still, and the voices softened, becoming a haunting melody that echoed through the garden. The woman's statue seemed to shimmer, and the air around me pulsed with energy. "Face the truth," she whispered, her voice a mere breath. My mind raced as I realized what I needed to do. I had to confront the darkness within myself, the fears that had led me here. The hotel was feeding on my anxiety, my doubts. If I could face them, perhaps I could set the trapped souls free. I closed my eyes, focusing on the fears that haunted me, the loneliness, the isolation, the overwhelming sense of being lost. I had to confront the shadows within, to acknowledge the darkness I had tried to suppress. As I delved deeper, I felt the energy shift, the shadows swirling around me, intensifying. I opened my eyes, and the figures were closer now, their faces etched with desperation. "Set us free," they cried, their voices rising in a crescendo. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "I acknowledge you," I declared, my voice steady despite the chaos around me. "I acknowledge your pain and your suffering. You are not forgotten." The garden trembled, the air charged with energy as the shadows converged. The figures began to dissipate, their anguish giving way to relief as they faded into the light. The woman's statue glowed brighter, her expression shifting from sorrow to peace. The whispers transformed into a harmonious chorus, filling the air with a sense of release. "Thank you," they murmured, their voices fading like a gentle breeze. As the last of the shadows dissipated, the garden was bathed in a warm, golden light. I stood there, trembling, a profound sense of relief washing over me. I had faced my fears and freed the souls trapped within the hotel. But just as I turned to leave, a cold breath swept over me, and I felt a dark presence lurking just beyond the light. "You cannot leave," it hissed, the voice echoing with a malevolent tone. My heart raced as I spun around, realizing that while I had freed the souls, the hotel itself still held a power over me. The air grew thick and oppressive, the warmth fading as shadows began to close in once more. "You are part of us now," the voice taunted, and I could feel the darkness consuming the light, wrapping around me like a vice. In that moment, I understood. The hotel was not merely a building, it was a living entity, feeding off fear and despair. I had faced the darkness of the souls trapped within, but now I had to confront my own impending doom. "Get out!" I screamed, racing toward the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. The darkness clawed at me, pulling me back, but I refused to give in. I could feel the weight of the hotel pressing down, suffocating me. I burst through the doors, collapsing onto the hotel's steps as dawn broke. The fog receded, revealing the world bathed in the golden light of morning. I was free, but the remnants of the hotel still lingered in my mind, an echo of the darkness I had faced. As I stood there, gasping for breath, I knew I would never forget the secrets of that hotel, the souls I had freed, and the darkness that still threatened to consume me. The whispers had quieted, but I could still feel their presence lingering in the corners of my mind, a reminder of the shadows that could return. I walked away, leaving the hotel behind, but its mark would forever remain, a haunting melody of lost souls echoing in my heart. As I stumbled away from the hotel, the morning sun cut through the remnants of fog like a knife, illuminating the path ahead. I could hear the sounds of birds chirping, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, and yet a heavy silence hung in the air, a stark contrast to the chaos I had just escaped. My heart raced, the adrenaline still coursing through my veins as I fought against the urge to look back. The hotel, with all its secrets and shadows, loomed large in my mind. I walked along the dirt path leading to the main road, my feet moving automatically as I replayed the events of the previous night in my head. Had I truly faced the darkness? Or had I merely scratched the surface? The chilling voice that had echoed through the garden still resonated in my ears, warning me that I was now part of something larger, something sinister. With every step, I felt a mix of relief and lingering dread. The trapped souls had been released, but at what cost? The hotel was still there, still waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to walk through its doors. I couldn't shake the feeling that my escape was just a temporary reprieve. The darkness could return at any moment. As I reached the main road, the distant sounds of civilization began to filter in, a car engine rumbling, voices chatting, the distant laughter of children. It was comforting, yet alien, as if I had stepped into another world entirely. I desperately wanted to forget the hotel and its horrors, but the memory clung to me like a shadow, an invisible tether that I couldn't sever. I decided to head to a nearby cafe, hoping that a cup of coffee and the buzz of normal life would help clear my mind. As I entered the quaint establishment, the warm aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped me, and I felt a momentary sense of safety. I took a seat by the window, trying to steady my racing heart, but even in this seemingly peaceful place, I could feel the echo of the hotel in my thoughts. The barista greeted me with a smile, pouring me a steaming cup of coffee. I sipped it slowly, savoring the warmth, but my thoughts remained dark. I glanced around the cafe, taking in the chatter and laughter, but my mind kept drifting back to the hotel. What if the darkness had followed me? What if the souls I had freed were still trapped, yearning for release? I took out my phone and began to search for more information about the hotel. My fingers trembled as I typed its name into the search bar. As the results loaded, I felt a chill run down my spine. Articles about disappearances, strange occurrences, and unsettling experiences flooded the screen. Each headline seemed to scream a warning, and my heart sank as I read the details. Guests who had vanished without a trace, sightings of shadowy figures in the halls, and the ominous whispers that had haunted so many. Another one, I murmured, barely able to believe what I was reading. Each story seemed to echo my own experience, reinforcing the reality of what I had encountered. The hotel was a trap, a vortex of despair drawing in unsuspecting visitors, and I had narrowly escaped. I continued to scroll, my heart racing as I stumbled upon a forum where others shared their experiences. One post caught my eye: if you stayed at the hotel, be careful. The whispers don't just fade away. They'll find you, and you may never be free. A shudder ran through me as I read the chilling words. I set my phone down, feeling a wave of panic wash over me. The barista noticed my distress and approached. "Are you all right?" she asked, concern etched on her face. I forced a smile, not wanting to share the burden of my horror. "I'm fine, just too much caffeine, I guess." "Maybe some fresh air will help," she suggested gently. I nodded, grateful for the distraction, and stepped outside into the crisp morning air. As I stood on the sidewalk, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm within me. The sun was bright, the sky a brilliant blue, and yet an unsettling feeling lingered, like a storm cloud hiding just out of sight. I walked aimlessly, lost in thought, trying to shake the images of the hotel from my mind. But the shadows were not so easily forgotten. That night, as I lay in bed in my hotel room, far from the cursed establishment, I felt the familiar chill creep over me. I pulled the covers tightly around myself, desperately trying to find comfort in the fabric. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by nightmares of shadows moving just beyond the edge of my vision, whispers beckoning me back. I awoke in a cold sweat, gasping for breath. It was still dark outside, and the room felt stifling. I glanced at the clock, 2 a.m. My heart raced as I recalled the horrors of the previous nights, the haunting voices, and the desperate faces of the trapped souls. I had escaped, but for how long? Just as I began to calm myself, I heard it, a soft, echoing whisper that seemed to float through the darkness. "Come back," it beckoned, a voice I recognized from the hotel. Panic surged through me, and I sat up, straining to listen. Was I truly hearing things, or had the darkness followed me here? I got out of bed, trembling as I stepped toward the window. Outside, the street was quiet, the only sound the distant rustle of leaves. I leaned against the glass, peering into the void of night, but there was nothing, only the cold embrace of fear wrapping around me. "Get a grip," I whispered to myself, attempting to shake off the dread. But the whisper came again, more insistent this time. "You must return." I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The hotel was calling me, and I could feel its pull, an unrelenting force drawing me back to the darkness I had tried so hard to escape. I wanted to scream, to cry out in defiance, but fear paralyzed me. Just then, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking the silence. I grabbed it, hoping for a distraction. A new message appeared, a notification from the forum I had visited earlier. With shaking hands, I opened it. "Beware the darkness that follows," it read. "If you hear the whispers, don't ignore them. You may be their next victim." The words sent chills down my spine. I was not alone in this. Others had felt the same presence, the same darkness clawing at the edges of their minds. I dropped the phone, my breath hitching in my throat. The whispers were growing louder, the shadows creeping in, and I felt the walls of my reality closing in. I had to confront the darkness, to face whatever malevolence had latched onto my soul. I remembered the old man's words, "Face the darkness within you." I needed to go back. But how could I? The very thought of returning to that hotel sent waves of terror crashing over me. Yet deep down, I knew that I wouldn't find peace until I faced it head on. Resolute, I grabbed my bag and began to prepare for the journey back to the hotel. I gathered what little belongings I had, my heart pounding in anticipation. The whispers tugged at my mind, urging me onward, guiding me back to the very heart of the darkness. As dawn broke, I set off, the road ahead filled with uncertainty and fear. I drove in silence, my thoughts racing with dread and determination. Each mile brought me closer to the hotel and the secrets it held. When I finally arrived, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the hotel's facade. I stepped out of the car, the chill of the air biting at my skin. The whispers were louder now, echoing through my mind like a siren's call. With a deep breath, I pushed through the heavy doors and stepped inside. The lobby was as I remembered, dimly lit and silent, with an air of foreboding that seemed to wrap around me like a shroud. I felt the presence of the hotel immediately, a suffocating weight pressing down on me. I was here to confront it, to face whatever it was that had haunted me since I first arrived. As I made my way to the garden, I noticed that the atmosphere had changed. The shadows seemed to dance along the walls, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I pushed through the door and stepped into the garden, my heart racing as I approached the fountain. The woman's statue stood there, her eyes now glimmering with an eerie light. I felt drawn to her, the air thick with tension. "You came back," she seemed to say, her voice echoing in my mind. "I need to know," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The shadows swirled around me, and I could feel the darkness closing in. "Face us, face the truth," they chorused, the voices melding into one. I closed my eyes, allowing the fear to wash over me. "I'm ready," I declared, determination rising within me. "Show me what I need to see." In an instant, the garden transformed, and I was plunged into a vision, a swirling maelstrom of memories and shadows. I saw faces, lost and tormented, their eyes filled with sorrow and despair. They reached out to me, pleading for release, for someone to acknowledge their pain. And then, I saw myself, lost, trapped in my own fears and insecurities. I was suffocating under the weight of it all, drowning in the darkness I had tried so hard to escape. "Release us," the voices echoed, merging into a single cry. "Face your fears, and you shall be free." Tears streamed down my face as I opened my eyes, understanding flooding my mind. The hotel was a reflection of my own inner turmoil, the shadows a manifestation of the fears I had buried deep within. "I understand," I whispered, my voice steady now. "I will not let you take me. I will face you." The shadows recoiled, swirling around me like a tempest. "You cannot escape," they shrieked, but I stood firm, my heart racing. "I am stronger than you," I shouted, feeling the power of my resolve. The shadows writhed, but I held my ground. The air crackled with energy, and in that moment, I felt a surge of clarity. With a final cry, I reached deep within myself, summoning all the strength I had. "I release you," I declared, my voice ringing out like a bell. The shadows shrieked, dissolving into the light, their hold on me breaking as I faced the darkness head-on. And then, silence fell. The garden was still, the oppressive weight lifted. The air felt lighter, and for the first time, I could breathe freely. I opened my eyes, looking around in awe. The fountain sparkled in the sunlight, the flowers blooming with vibrant colors. The hotel was no longer a place of dread, but a symbol of my triumph over fear. As I stepped back into the hotel, I felt the weight of the past lift from my shoulders. I had faced my demons, confronted the darkness within, and emerged victorious. The whispers had faded, the shadows retreating into the depths of my memory. I walked out of the hotel, a newfound sense of peace enveloping me. The sun shone brightly overhead, and I knew that I was free. Free from the chains of fear that had bound me for so long. But as I stepped into the light, a fleeting thought crossed my mind. The darkness may have retreated, but it would always be a part of me, a reminder of the shadows I had faced and the strength I had discovered within. And perhaps that was the true secret of the hotel, not the darkness that lingered, but the light that emerged when one chose to confront their fears. But joy did not last long. As soon as I sat behind the wheel and started the engine, something inside me tightened. I glanced in the rearview mirror and suddenly felt as if someone was watching me. The vision I had seen in the garden refused to let go. I closed my eyes, preparing myself for the drive home. "It's just memories," I whispered to myself. On the way back to the city, I recalled the faces of those who had once stayed in the hotel. I thought about those who fell under the shadow of its horrific secrets. Had I truly freed them? Or had I, instead, become another vessel for their fears? This question gnawed at my consciousness as I drove back toward the familiarity of home. The city's skyline appeared on the horizon, and I felt a mixture of relief and dread. The towering buildings that once seemed so inviting now loomed like sentinels, watching my approach. My heart raced, remembering the warning from the hotel staff, the whispers of those who vanished. Arriving home, I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, but the silence felt unsettling. Every creak of the floorboards echoed like a ghostly whisper. I switched on the lights, hoping to dispel the lingering darkness that seemed to follow me. I tried to convince myself that I was safe, that the hotel was behind me. Yet, as the days passed, strange occurrences began to unfold. I'd hear soft murmurs while I was alone, feel a chill in the air, and sometimes catch a glimpse of fleeting shadows at the edges of my vision. The shadows seemed to linger, taunting me, reminding me of my encounter. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to confront my fears directly. I lit candles and sat in the living room, the flickering light casting elongated shadows on the walls. "If you are here, show yourself," I called into the stillness. My voice wavered, betraying the fear I felt deep inside. The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. I could almost hear the whispers echoing around me, urging me to look closer, to dig deeper into the hidden corners of my mind. Then, in the dim glow of the candlelight, I noticed a mirror hanging on the wall, one I had inherited from my grandmother. It had always felt odd to me, as if it held secrets of its own. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding. As I gazed into the glass, the reflection shimmered unnaturally. Instead of my own face, I saw fleeting images, a glimpse of the hotel lobby, a flicker of a dark figure lurking in the corner, and then the faces of those who had vanished. Their eyes were hollow, pleading for release. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a storm. "Help us, help us," they chanted, drowning me in their desperation. I stumbled back, breaking the connection, my mind racing. Had I unknowingly brought their darkness home with me? I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but the next few nights were riddled with nightmares, visions of the hotel and its haunting inhabitants. Each dream dragged me deeper into the abyss, and I felt my grip on reality slipping. Desperation clawed at me. I needed to go back, to face the hotel again, but this time not as a visitor. I had to confront the heart of its darkness and uncover the truth behind the disappearances. With that thought solidifying in my mind, I made my decision. I would return to the hotel. As I packed a bag, my hands trembled. I knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but the voices called to me. I had to finish what I had started. This time, I would find out the real secret of the hotel. As dawn broke, I found myself driving back to the hotel, the familiar road stretching out before me like a dark omen. The memories of my previous stay haunted me, every creak of the floorboards, every whisper in the shadows. But now, I felt a sense of purpose. I would confront whatever lay within those walls. Upon arriving, the hotel stood as it had before, an imposing structure cloaked in silence. I took a deep breath, steeling myself as I pushed open the heavy door. The lobby felt different this time, as if the walls were watching me. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, but I pressed on. I approached the front desk, where a familiar face greeted me, a woman with tired eyes and a knowing expression. "Back so soon?" she asked, her voice low and measured. "I need to know the truth," I replied, my voice firm. About the guests, the disappearances. Her gaze shifted to the floor, a heavy silence hanging between us. You may not want to know, she warned, but I could see the faint tremor in her hands. Please, I insisted. I have to understand. With a reluctant sigh, she gestured for me to follow her to a back room. Inside, the atmosphere felt dense, as if the air itself was holding its breath. She opened a dusty ledger filled with names of those who had stayed here and never left. My heart sank as I recognized some of the entries, the same faces that had haunted my dreams. This hotel was built on cursed ground, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The spirits of those who died here linger, trapped between worlds. They draw others in, feeding off their fears. Those who stay too long, they become part of the darkness. A chill ran down my spine as her words sank in. I realized that I had brushed against the edges of this reality during my last stay. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. You must confront the spirits, help them find peace, she instructed. But be careful. The darkness will fight back. I nodded, my determination hardening. I returned to my room, the familiar decor now a reminder of the terror that awaited me. I lit a candle, just as I had done at home, and took a deep breath. It was time to face the hotel's heart. The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped. I could almost hear the whispers echoing around me, urging me to look closer, to dig deeper into the hidden corners of my mind. Then, in the dim glow of the candlelight, I noticed a mirror hanging on the wall, one I had inherited from my grandmother. It had always felt odd to me, as if it held secrets of its own. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding. As I gazed into the glass, the reflection shimmered unnaturally. Instead of my own face, I saw fleeting images, a glimpse of the hotel lobby, a flicker of a dark figure lurking in the corner, and then the faces of those who had vanished. Their eyes were hollow, pleading for release. The whispers intensified, swirling around me like a storm. Help us, they chanted, drowning me in their desperation. I stumbled back, breaking the connection, my mind racing. Had I unknowingly brought their darkness home with me? I tried to dismiss it as my imagination, but the next few nights were riddled with nightmares, visions of the hotel and its haunting inhabitants. Each dream dragged me deeper into the abyss, and I felt my grip on reality slipping. Desperation clawed at me. I needed to go back, to face the hotel again, but this time, not as a visitor. I had to confront the heart of its darkness and uncover the truth behind the disappearances. With that thought solidifying in my mind, I made my decision. I would return to the hotel. As I packed a bag, my hands trembled. I knew the journey ahead would not be easy, but the voices called to me. I had to finish what I had started. This time, I would find out the real secret of the hotel. As dawn broke, I found myself driving back to the hotel, the familiar road stretching out before me like a dark omen. The memories of my previous stay haunted me, every creak of the floorboards, every whisper in the shadows. But now, I felt a sense of purpose. I would confront whatever lay within those walls. Upon arriving, the hotel stood as it had before, an imposing structure cloaked in silence. I took a deep breath, steeling myself as I pushed open the heavy door. The lobby felt different this time, as if the walls were watching me. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, but I pressed on. I approached the front desk, where a familiar face greeted me, a woman with tired eyes and a knowing expression. "Back so soon?" she asked, her voice low and measured. "I need to know the truth," I replied, my voice firm. about the guests, the disappearances. Her gaze shifted to the floor, a heavy silence hanging between us. You may not want to know, she warned, but I could see the faint tremor in her hands. Please, I insisted. I have to understand. With a reluctant sigh, she gestured for me to follow her to a back room. Inside, the atmosphere felt dense, as if the air itself was holding its breath. She opened a dusty ledger filled with names of those who had stayed here and never left. My heart sank as I recognized some of the entries, the same faces that had haunted my dreams. This hotel was built on cursed ground, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. The spirits of those who die here linger, trapped between worlds. They draw others in, feeding off their fears. Those who stay too long, they become part of the darkness. A chill ran down my spine as her words sank in. I realized that I had brushed against the edges of this reality during my last stay. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. You must confront the spirits, help them find peace, she instructed. But be careful. The darkness will fight back. I nodded, my determination hardening. I returned to my room, the familiar decor now a reminder of the terror that awaited me. I lit a candle, just as I had done at home, and took a deep breath. It was time to face the hotel's heart. I closed my eyes and reached out, calling to the spirits that lingered. I know you're here. I'm here to help. The air thickened around me, and a cold breeze swept through the room. I could hear the whispers rising again, the desperate cries merging into one coherent plea. Help us, release us. The walls trembled as shadows coalesced before me, forming the faces of the lost. Their eyes were filled with sorrow, but also a flicker of hope. You have the power to free us, they urged, their voices echoing in unison. I focused, channeling my fear into a surge of determination. I'm here. I will help you find peace. I shouted, my voice cutting through the darkness. The shadows writhed, responding to my call, and I felt the weight of their despair pressing in on me. With every ounce of courage, I opened my eyes and faced the swirling mass of darkness. You have no power over me. I release you, I declared, feeling the energy shift around me. The shadows hesitated, and for a moment, the room was still. Then, with a deafening roar, the darkness surged toward me, trying to engulf me. But I stood my ground, forcing my will against it. I will not let you take me. I choose light over fear. In that moment of clarity, I could see the flickering images of the spirits trapped within the shadows. Their faces reflected my own fear, but also my resolve. I reached out, connecting with their energy. You are not alone. You can be free. I shouted, pouring my heart into my words. The shadows screamed, their cries morphing into something almost human. I could feel the resistance weakening, the darkness losing its grip. The air around me crackled with energy as I repeated the mantra, "You are free. You are free." Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from within, scattering the darkness like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. The shadows dissipated, leaving behind a profound silence. The room felt lighter, the oppressive atmosphere replaced by an overwhelming sense of peace. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. The hotel, once a place of terror, now radiated warmth. I felt the presence of the spirits lift, their sorrow transformed into gratitude. As I stood up, I glanced around, and for the first time, I truly felt at home. The hotel was no longer a prison, but a sanctuary. I walked out of the room, knowing that I had freed not just the spirits, but also myself from the chains of fear. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the hotel grounds. I stepped outside, feeling the gentle breeze on my face, and smiled. I had faced the darkness, and in doing so, had found the light within. But as I looked back at the hotel, a thought crossed my mind. The darkness may always be there, lingering just beneath the surface. Yet, I had learned that facing it was the only way to truly set myself free. And so, I walked away from the hotel, knowing that I had uncovered its secret, not just the horror that resided within its walls, but the strength that lay within me. The mystery of the forest lake. Have you ever heard a story that sends a shiver down your spine? A tale so unsettling that it lingers in your thoughts long after you've heard it? I remember the first time I encountered the whispers of the forest lake, a place shrouded in mystery and foreboding. As a child, I spent every summer in the small village of Chernovik, nestled deep in the heart of the forest. The villagers were a tight-knit community, sharing laughter and stories around bonfires as the sun dipped below the horizon. But there was one story that sent a chill through our gatherings, the tale of the forest lake, a glistening expanse of water that promised beauty but concealed a dark secret. "You should never swim in that lake," my grandmother used to warn, her voice quaking with the weight of her words. "It takes those who dare to enter its depths. They disappear without a trace." At first, I dismissed her warnings as mere superstition, the exaggerations of a woman who had seen too much in her lifetime. But as I grew older, curiosity began to gnaw at me. One sweltering afternoon, driven by a mixture of bravado and naivety, I decided to visit the lake. I had heard the stories, but had never seen it for myself. The villagers had always described it as beautiful, with crystal-clear waters reflecting the sky like a perfect mirror. Yet, as I approached, the air grew heavier, the shadows of the trees stretching long across the ground, creating a shroud of darkness around the water's edge. Standing there, I felt an inexplicable pull towards the lake, a siren call that whispered promises of adventure. The surface was eerily calm, but the reflections of the surrounding trees distorted into nightmarish shapes. I hesitated, glancing back towards the village, where the laughter of children echoed in the distance. A part of me wanted to turn back, to heed the warnings I had heard since childhood. But the allure of the unknown was stronger. As I stepped closer, the sun dipped behind the trees, casting an eerie twilight over the water. I crouched by the edge, dipping my fingers into the cool, clear liquid. It felt alive, almost as if it were breathing, pulsating beneath my touch. A shiver ran down my spine, and I pulled my hand back, startled. But just as I was about to leave, I heard it, a soft, melodic voice carried by the wind, beckoning me to stay. "Stay with us," it sang, sweet and haunting. My heart raced as I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. The woods seemed to close in around me, silence settling like a heavy blanket. The village, with its warmth and familiarity, felt like a distant memory. I was captivated, my feet rooted to the spot, a mix of fear and fascination swirling within me. Why did the lake call to me? What awaited beneath its surface? A part of me wanted to dive in, to discover the secrets hidden below, but the tales of the villagers echoed in my mind. Each story ended in tragedy, lives lost, dreams shattered, and families left behind. As night fell, darkness enveloped the forest. The once inviting lake now appeared menacing, a dark abyss that concealed unimaginable horrors. The voice faded into silence, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness that gnawed at my soul. Trembling, I finally tore my gaze away from the water, my heart pounding in my chest. I hurried back to the village, the whispers of the lake still ringing in my ears. The laughter of the children was gone, replaced by a heavy stillness that seemed to suffocate the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that I had crossed a threshold I couldn't return from. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, the shadows of my room dancing along the walls as the wind rustled the leaves outside. My thoughts spiraled back to the lake, the whispers that had woven through my mind like a sinister lullaby. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the calm surface of the water, reflecting not just the trees, but something darker lurking beneath. The next day, I awoke with a determination to forget about the lake, to cast aside the fear that had gripped my heart. The village was alive with activity, children playing in the sun, their laughter filling the air. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I was an outsider among the familiar faces, a stranger in my own childhood home. As I walked through the village, I noticed the wary glances directed towards me. The older villagers exchanged hushed whispers, their expressions clouded with concern. It was as if they knew of my visit to the lake, as if my curiosity had marked me in some unseen way. "Stay away from that water," an elderly man mourned as I passed by. His face was etched with lines of worry, eyes filled with a lifetime of sorrow. "It's not just a lake, it's a graveyard for lost souls." I forced a smile, attempting to brush off his words. "I'm just going to visit some friends," I lied, hoping to quell the unease that gnawed at me. But even as I spoke, I felt the weight of his gaze, a silent accusation that sent a shiver down my spine. Days turned into weeks, yet the lake haunted me. I tried to immerse myself in village life, participating in the harvest festival, sharing stories with friends, but each time I closed my eyes, I was drawn back to the water's edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me, something I had yet to uncover. One evening, emboldened by a growing sense of defiance, I gathered a few friends to join me for a late-night excursion to the lake. We were drawn by a mix of excitement and fear, a group of young souls daring to challenge the warnings of our elders. As darkness enveloped the forest, we made our way through the trees, the moon casting an ethereal glow that illuminated our path. When we arrived, the lake was bathed in silver light, the surface shimmering like 1,000 tiny stars. My heart raced, a mix of exhilaration and trepidation coursing through my veins. My friends laughed and joked, but I felt an undercurrent of anxiety, a sense of impending doom. "Let's swim," one of them shouted, a dare echoing in the stillness. My stomach twisted at the suggestion, but I didn't want to appear afraid. "Yeah, come on. What are you scared of?" They cheered, their voices ringing out into the night. As they splashed into the water, I hesitated, standing at the edge, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice I had heard weeks ago whispered through my mind, calling to me, promising adventure. But beneath that call was a darker warning, a reminder of the villagers' tales. I watched as my friends swam deeper, laughter echoing across the water. But then, the atmosphere shifted. The playful splashes turned into something else, something unnerving. The laughter faded, replaced by a strange silence that hung in the air. "Guys, come back!" I shouted, my voice trembling as I stepped closer to the water. But they didn't respond. Instead, they seemed to be drawn further out, their figures becoming mere silhouettes against the shimmering surface. Panic gripped me as I shouted their names, but the lake swallowed my words, leaving an unsettling stillness in its wake. I stumbled back, heart racing as a sense of dread washed over me. The darkness seemed to swirl around me, enveloping me in its cold embrace. Just then, a piercing scream shattered the silence, sending a jolt of terror through my body. I rushed to the water's edge, eyes wide with horror as I saw one of my friends struggling against the waves. "Help! I can't swim." Their voice was choked with fear, panic rippling through the air. Without thinking, I dove into the water, the coldness hitting me like a slap. I fought against the current, adrenaline coursing through my veins as I swam towards them. But as I reached out, the water shifted, pulling me down, dragging me into its depths. "Hold on!" I shouted, reaching for my friend, but the darkness enveloped us both. My heart raced as I felt the pull of the lake, the sensation of something watching us from below. It was as if the water itself was alive, a predator lying in wait. In that moment, time seemed to stretch, the world above fading away. I felt the pressure of the water surrounding me, the weight of unseen eyes lurking in the darkness. I fought against the current, my lungs burning, but the lake was unforgiving. With every ounce of strength, I clawed at the water, my fingers searching for my friend, but the dark depths pulled me down, disorienting me. I was gasping for air, and panic surged within me. The surface above seemed so far away, shimmering like a distant dream. Just as I felt my strength waning, I caught a glimpse of my friend's hand, flailing against the water, their face a mask of terror. I lunged forward, grasping their wrists with a desperation fueled by fear. "I've got you. Just hold on." With every ounce of willpower, I kicked towards the surface, dragging my friend along with me. The water was relentless, a frigid grip tightening around my legs, threatening to pull me back down. But I could see the moonlight breaking through, a beacon of hope guiding us upward. Finally, we broke the surface, gasping for breath, our bodies spluttering as we fought against the waves. "Swim," I urged, pushing us both toward the shore. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing the panic that consumed me. As we reached the edge, I felt a surge of relief wash over me, but it was short-lived. I turned to help my friend out of the water, but they were trembling, eyes wide with terror. "Did you see it?" they gasped, their voice barely above a whisper. Something was down there. Something was watching us. Before I could respond, I heard the others calling from the shore, their voices filled with confusion and fear. "What happened? Where are you?" They rushed to our side, helping us pull ourselves out of the water, but my mind was racing, replaying the terror we had just experienced. "We need to leave," I urged, glancing back at the lake. The water rippled ominously, and for a moment, I thought I saw a dark shape shift beneath the surface, lurking just out of sight. "What's wrong?" one of my friends asked, concern etched on their face. I hesitated, searching for the right words. "I don't know." It felt like something was down there. We shouldn't have gone in. Reluctantly, we began to walk back through the dark forest, the weight of the night pressing down upon us. My mind churned with thoughts of the lake, the whispers that still echoed in my ears. As we reached the village, the warmth of the lanterns flickering in the windows offered little comfort. That night, I lay awake, haunted by the darkness of the lake. I could still hear my friend's voice, the panic that had filled the air. I had thought I was brave, daring to challenge the warnings, but I had only brought us closer to danger. The whispers grew louder, invading my thoughts, each one laced with a promise of something I could not understand. As the days passed, I noticed a change in my friends. They spoke less, their laughter replaced by an uneasy silence that hung between us. I could see it in their eyes, the fear that lurked beneath the surface, the shadows of what we had encountered together. I tried to dismiss it, to convince myself that we were safe, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the lake was still watching us, waiting for its next victim. One evening, as I walked through the village, I overheard a group of villagers discussing a recent disappearance. Another one, just like the others, one of them murmured. They went swimming and never came back. My stomach twisted as I listened, a cold knot forming in my gut. I felt a growing sense of dread settle over me, the realization that the tales were more than just stories. The lake was a predator, an entity that preyed on the curious, the daring. I was terrified, but even more so, I was determined to uncover the truth behind the whispers, the darkness that lay beneath the surface. I confided in my closest friend, urging them to investigate the lake with me. We can't let fear control us, I insisted, my voice filled with conviction. We need to understand what's happening. Reluctantly, they agreed, but I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. As we approached the lake once more, the atmosphere shifted, the air thick with tension. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the water. I felt the familiar pull, the whispering voice beckoning me closer, but this time I was resolved. We would uncover the truth. With each step towards the lake, my heart pounded like a drum, the sound echoing in my ears. I glanced at my friend, who walked beside me, their face pale, eyes darting nervously around the dark forest. We had agreed to face our fears, but the closer we got, the more I regretted our decision. As we reached the water's edge, the night seemed to hold its breath. The surface glimmered in the moonlight, calm and inviting, yet I could feel an undercurrent of menace lurking beneath. The whispers returned, soft and insistent, pulling at the edges of my mind. Come closer, they seemed to say, a lullaby laced with danger. Let's just look, I said, trying to steady my voice. We don't have to swim. We just need to understand why it feels so alive. My friend nodded reluctantly, and we crouched by the water, peering into its depths. The reflection of the moon shimmered, distorting into ghostly shapes that danced beneath the surface. I shivered, unable to shake the feeling that we were being watched. Do you think the stories are true? My friend asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Do you think people really disappear in this lake? I swallowed hard, contemplating the weight of those words. I don't know, but I feel like there's something here, something we need to discover. Just then, a low ripple broke the surface, sending a shudder through me. I squinted into the water, heart racing, as I thought I caught a glimpse of movement, a dark shadow darting beneath the waves. Did you see that? I asked, my voice trembling. What? Where? My friend leaned closer, eyes wide with fear. There, just below the surface. I pointed, but as I did, the water became still again, revealing nothing but the smooth, dark depths. My heart sank as doubt crept in. Perhaps it was just my imagination, a trick of the mind playing games in the darkness. But then, I heard it, the voice again, clearer now, resonating through the stillness. Stay with us. I felt a chill run down my spine. We should go, I urged, but my friend remained transfixed, as if caught in a spell. We need to leave. Suddenly, a loud splash erupted behind us, and we whipped around to see another figure stepping out from the trees. It was one of our friends, their face pale and eyes wide with fear. You guys. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. What are you talking about? I asked, confusion flooding through me. I was just by the lake, and I heard the whispers. I saw something, they stammered, breathless. It's not just a story. It's real. We need to warn everyone. The urgency in their voice snapped my friend out of their daze, and we quickly regrouped, our hearts racing as we retreated from the water. The weight of fear settled over us like a heavy cloak, each step feeling heavier as we moved away from the lake's grasp. "Did you hear what it said?" my friend whispered, eyes darting back toward the water. "It was calling to us." "Yes," I replied, my voice shaking. "But what does it want?" We made our way back through the forest, shadows stretching and twisting around us, as if the trees themselves were alive, watching our every move. The tension in the air was palpable, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed, that something dark was lurking just out of sight. Once we reached the village, we gathered in a dimly lit room at the local tavern, our faces pale with fear. We shared our experiences, recounting the whispers, the shadows, and the overwhelming sense of dread that had filled the air. The villagers listened intently, their expressions a mix of concern and disbelief. "You shouldn't have gone near that lake," one of the older men said, shaking his head. "The stories are there for a reason. It's a place of danger, of lost souls." "But we saw something," I protested, desperation lacing my words. "It was real. We need to do something before more people go missing." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily in the air. Finally, one of the villagers spoke up. "If you're so convinced, then you must return to the lake. But beware, for the water does not take kindly to those who dare to challenge it." The warning hung over us like a dark cloud, but I could see the determination in my friend's eyes. We knew we had to uncover the truth, to face the lake once and for all. As we prepared for our next venture into the forest, I felt a mix of dread and anticipation. The whispers still echoed in my mind, a haunting melody that both terrified and intrigued me. What awaited us at the water's edge? What secrets lay beneath the calm surface? I could only hope that we would find the answers we sought before it was too late. As night descended, we gathered our courage, preparing to confront the lake once more. The atmosphere was thick with tension, each of us aware of the danger that lay ahead. Armed with flashlights and a sense of determination, we stepped into the dark forest, the familiar path now feeling foreign and menacing. With each step, the trees loomed closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands. My heart raced, the whispers growing louder, as if the forest itself was warning us to turn back. But we pressed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desperate need for answers. When we finally reached the lake, its surface shimmered under the moonlight, a deceptive beauty hiding the darkness below. The air was still, as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for us to make our move. I felt the familiar pull, a tug at my mind urging me to step closer, to listen. "Are we really doing this?" one of my friends asked, their voice barely above a whisper. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my own fears. "We have to. We need to understand what's happening here." As we approached the water's edge, the whispers intensified, swirling around us like a haunting melody. "Come closer, don't be afraid," they seemed to beckon, wrapping around us, luring us toward the lake. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed from the depths, shaking the ground beneath our feet. "What was that?" my friend shouted, panic rising in their voice. "Just the water," I replied, though my own fear was mounting. "We need to focus." With trembling hands, I shone my flashlight across the surface, the beam cutting through the darkness. As the light danced on the water, I caught a glimpse of movement just beneath the surface, a fleeting shadow that disappeared as quickly as it appeared. "Did you see that?" I gasped, turning to my friends. They nodded, eyes wide with terror. We stood there, frozen, the reality of our situation sinking in. We were standing at the edge of something far more sinister than we had anticipated. I felt the cold fingers of fear wrap around my heart, tightening with every passing moment. We should throw something in, I suggested, my voice shaky. See if it reacts. Reluctantly, we picked up a few stones, the cold weight of them feeling oddly comforting. With a nod, we tossed them into the lake, watching as they sank into the dark waters. But instead of the expected splashes, a ripple of disturbance spread out, a wave of energy that seemed to pulse beneath the surface. Then came the voices, louder and clearer than before, swirling around us like a tempest. Stay, 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 they chanted, echoing in our minds. My pulse quickened as the shadows beneath the water began to shift, swirling and coiling like something alive. What's happening? One of my friends cried, taking a step back. We need to leave. But it was too late. A sudden surge of water erupted from the depths, creating a massive wave that crashed towards us. We stumbled back, scrambling to escape the onslaught, but the wave was relentless. I felt it crash against me, pulling me into the water's icy embrace. As I was dragged under, the world above faded into darkness. Panic engulfed me, my lungs screaming for air. I fought against the current, my body thrashing wildly, but the lake held me captive, its cold grip tightening around me. In the depths, I caught a glimpse of movement, a dark figure swimming toward me, its form indistinct but undeniably real. It moved with a speed that sent chills down my spine, and I realized with horror that I was not alone. Suddenly, a strong hand grasped my arm, pulling me toward the surface. I gasped for air as I broke free, my friends' faces emerging through the chaos. Help! We need to get out. I shouted, panic lacing my voice. Swim, my friend urged, their face a mask of fear. We fought against the waves, pushing ourselves toward the shore. The water was alive, thrashing around us as if trying to pull us back down into the abyss. With every stroke, I could feel the darkness chasing us, a presence lurking just out of sight. I glanced back, my heart racing, and for a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of something in the water, a pair of glowing eyes watching us, unblinking and hungry. Faster! I screamed, the words barely escaping my lips as we finally reached the shore, clawing our way out of the water. We collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath, adrenaline coursing through our veins. What was that? My friend panted, eyes wide with terror. I don't know, I replied, shaking uncontrollably. But it's not just a lake. It's something much darker. As we sat there, the whispers faded into the night, but the fear remained. We had crossed a line we could never uncross, delving into a darkness that felt both ancient and alive. The lake was a keeper of secrets, and now we were entangled in its web, marked by its sinister call. We sat on the shore, the cool night air wrapping around us like a shroud. The lake stretched out before us, dark and foreboding, its surface calm once again. But beneath that calm lay a roiling tide of fear and uncertainty. Each of us breathed heavily, the adrenaline still coursing through our veins as we processed what had just happened. What do we do now? One of my friends asked, their voice shaking. We need to warn everyone, I said, my heart pounding in my chest. We can't let anyone else go near that lake. But what if they don't believe us? My friend replied, glancing nervously at the water. What if they think we're just exaggerating? Then we'll show them, I insisted, the fire of determination igniting within me. We need to gather more evidence. We can't let fear silence us. Reluctantly, my friends nodded, and we made our way back through the dark forest. Each rustle of leaves and snap of twigs heightened our anxiety, the shadows around us seeming to stretch and twist. The whispers lingered in my mind, the haunting melody a reminder of the danger we had barely escaped. When we reached the village, we gathered in the tavern once again. The atmosphere was heavy, the usual chatter replaced by hushed conversations. I could see the concern in the eyes of the villagers as we recounted our experience, the urgency in our voices echoing through the room. "There's something wrong with that lake," I said, my voice steady. "We've seen it for ourselves. People are going missing, and we've felt the danger firsthand." The villagers exchanged glances, uncertainty etched on their faces. "You can't be serious," an elder finally spoke, shaking his head. "You're just scared. The lake is a part of our lives. We've grown up with it. It's not evil, but it is." I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. "We felt it. The whispers, the darkness, it's alive, and it wants to take more people." A murmur of dissent rippled through the crowd. "This is just a tale to scare children," another villager argued. "We've fished those waters for generations without issue. It's just a lake." My heart sank as I watched the skepticism in their eyes. How could I make them understand? How could I convey the terror we had faced? I glanced at my friends, seeing the same fear reflected in their expressions. We needed proof, something tangible to convince them. "Let's go back," I said suddenly, inspiration igniting within me. "We'll take a camera. We'll document everything. If we can show them what we saw, maybe then they'll believe us." My friends hesitated, fear etched into their features, but they nodded, knowing we had no other choice. The village's skepticism weighed heavily on our hearts, but we couldn't let our fear win. The lake had claimed too many lives already, and we had to do something before it took another. As we gathered our supplies, a camera, flashlights, and a few safety items, we felt the weight of the village's doubt bearing down on us. The air grew heavy with anticipation as we prepared for our next descent into the unknown. Once more, we entered the forest, the darkness creeping in around us. The path felt longer this time, each step an echo of the fear that lingered in our hearts. The whispers grew louder as we approached the lake, beckoning us closer, testing our resolve. When we finally arrived, the moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the water. I felt a chill race down my spine as I lifted the camera, the flash illuminating the surface for a brief moment. The water rippled, and I swore I saw movement just beneath the surface, a dark shape darting away. "Did you see that?" I gasped, turning to my friends. They nodded, fear written on their faces. "Let's capture everything," I urged, my voice trembling with urgency. "We need evidence." As we began to document the surroundings, flashes of light illuminated the water, casting fleeting glimpses into the abyss below. With every click, the tension in the air thickened. I felt the weight of something watching us, a presence lurking just beyond our reach. Suddenly, a loud splash echoed through the night, sending us scrambling back. "What was that?" one of my friends shouted, panic flooding their voice. "I don't know," I replied, heart racing. "But we need to stay together." The whispers rose again, a haunting chorus that filled my mind. "Stay, stay, stay," they wrapped around us, binding us to the darkness, urging us to come closer. As we huddled together, I felt a surge of determination. We had come too far to turn back now. I raised the camera again, pointing it toward the water. "If something is out there, we're going to find it," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. Just then, the water surged violently, sending a massive wave crashing toward us. We stumbled back, struggling to regain our balance as the wave receded, leaving a calm stillness in its wake. The whispers faded into silence, and I felt an unsettling sense of foreboding wash over me. "It's like it's warning us," one of my friends said, their voice trembling. "Or daring us," I replied, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on us. "We can't back down now. We have to confront whatever this is." As I focused the camera on the lake, a sudden movement caught my eye, a shadow gliding beneath the surface, growing larger and darker. My breath hitched as the realization struck me. We were not alone. "What is that?" my friend whispered, eyes wide with terror. Before I could answer, the water erupted, a monstrous form breaking through the surface. It was massive, a dark silhouette that towered above the lake, glistening in the moonlight. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar, engulfing us in a cacophony of sound. "Stay with us. Join us," they echoed, sending waves of terror crashing over us. We turned to run, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the lake was claiming us, its dark waters pulling us back into the depths. We were not just witnesses to its horrors, we were part of its story now. Panic surged through me as I turned to flee, my friends hot on my heels. The massive shape in the water thrashed violently, sending waves crashing against the shore. I could feel the whispers wrapping around me like chains, urging me to come back, to surrender to the darkness. "Keep moving," I shouted, adrenaline pushing me forward as we sprinted through the trees. The forest felt alive, the branches clawing at us as if trying to pull us back, to trap us in its grasp. Behind us, the cacophony of whispers grew louder, morphing into anguished cries that echoed through the night. "Stay with us. Join us." The words hung heavy in the air, chilling my blood as the realization set in. Whatever dwelled in that lake was not just a force of nature, it was something far more sinister. We burst into a clearing, the moonlight casting an ethereal glow on the ground. My friends and I huddled together, hearts pounding, trying to catch our breath. "What do we do now?" one of them gasped, fear etched into their features. "We need to warn the village," I said, my voice shaking but resolute. "They have to believe us now. We can't let anyone else go near that lake." But as I looked back toward the direction we had come, a chilling realization settled over me. The lake would not let us leave without a fight. The air felt thick with tension, and I could hear the whispers intensifying, echoing through the trees like a haunting symphony. Suddenly, a piercing scream shattered the night. My heart raced as I turned to see one of my friends stumbling, clutching their head as if trying to block out the voices. "It's too loud. Make it stop," they cried, collapsing to the ground. "No. Get up," I yelled, rushing to their side. But as I reached out to help, I felt an overwhelming force pushing me back, a dark energy emanating from the lake. "We can't let it take you," I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. The whispers grew louder, drowning out my words as the shadows from the lake crept closer, reaching for us like fingers of smoke. In that moment, I felt a surge of anger and determination. I couldn't let it win. I took a deep breath and focused on my friend, who was still writhing on the ground, lost in the chaos. "Fight it. We're not going to let this lake claim you." Gathering my strength, I gripped their arm, pulling them toward me. "We need to leave. Now," I shouted, and with every ounce of willpower I had, I pulled them to their feet. Together, we stumbled back toward the village, the shadows swirling around us, the whispers clawing at our minds. But I refused to look back. The lake was a predator, and we were its prey, but I wouldn't let it take us without a fight. As we approached the village, the familiar homes emerged from the darkness, lights flickering in the windows like beacons of safety. But the path felt longer this time, the shadows growing thicker as the whispers turned into anguished wails. Stay with us. Join us, they echoed, a chorus of despair that threatened to pull us under. We burst into the village square, breathless and frantic. The few villagers still awake turned to stare at us, confusion and concern flooding their faces. Help! You have to listen. I shouted, my voice hoarse. The lake, it's alive. It's taking people. You have to believe us. But as I looked around, I saw doubt in their eyes, skepticism creeping back in. You're just tired, one of the villagers said dismissively. You must be imagining things. No. It's real. I pleaded, desperation clawing at my throat. We saw it. We felt it. We have to warn everyone. But my words fell on deaf ears. I felt a wave of hopelessness crash over me as I glanced back toward the forest, where the shadows continued to writhe and twist, the whispers still echoing in my mind. Then, from the corner of my eye, I noticed movement near the edge of the village. A group of children had gathered, drawn by our cries, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights. In that moment, I realized they were our only hope. Listen to me, I shouted, directing my voice toward the children. Stay away from the lake. It's not safe. It wants to take you. The children stared at me, wide-eyed and curious, but the fear in their eyes mirrored my own. They began to whisper among themselves, glancing nervously toward the dark forest. I felt a surge of determination, knowing that we had to protect them. If you can, tell everyone. Don't let them go near that lake. I urged, hoping my words would reach the villagers in time. Just then, a massive wave erupted from the lake, crashing against the shore, sending water spraying into the air. The whispers roared to life, a deafening cacophony that shook the ground beneath us. Run! I shouted, grabbing my friends and sprinting toward the nearest house. We burst through the door, slamming it shut behind us as the echoes of the lake grew louder, filling the small space with an unsettling energy. The villagers watched in shock as we huddled together, the weight of fear and despair pressing down on us. We had uncovered the truth, but now it felt as if the darkness was closing in, threatening to consume us all. As I caught my breath, I realized that this wasn't just about us anymore. It was about everyone who had ever been drawn to the lake, everyone who had ever felt its pull. We had to fight back against the darkness, to reclaim our lives from its grasp. We'll figure this out, I whispered to my friends, determination igniting within me. We won't let it win. We'll find a way to stop it. But even as I spoke, I could hear the whispers growing louder, echoing through the walls, a sinister promise of what was to come. The lake was not finished with us yet, and I could only hope that we would be strong enough to face it. Days passed in a blur of fear and uncertainty. The village was abuzz with rumors, the whispers of the lake growing louder with each retelling. I could feel the weight of dread hanging over us like a storm cloud, threatening to burst at any moment. My friends and I had become pariahs, our warnings dismissed as hysteria. Yet the memory of that night haunted us, and the village's indifference felt like a betrayal. We tried to gather support, sharing our experience with anyone who would listen. But each time we recounted the tale of the dark shape in the water and the chilling whispers that beckoned us, we were met with disbelief. It's just a lake, they would say, shaking their heads. You're just spooked. The water isn't going to hurt you. But deep down, I knew the truth. The lake was a predator, and it was waiting. One evening, as I sat by the window, staring into the depths of the forest, I caught sight of a figure standing at the edge of the lake. My heart raced as I squinted into the fading light. A child, no older than 10, was gazing out at the water, seemingly entranced by the stillness. "No!" I gasped, my heart racing as I rushed out the door. "Come back." The child turned to look at me, confusion etching their features. "Why can't I go to the lake?" they asked innocently. "Because it's dangerous," I shouted, my voice trembling with urgency. "You have to come away from there." I sprinted toward them, my feet pounding against the earth. The whispers echoed in my mind, a haunting chorus that tugged at my resolve. "Stay, stay, stay," they called, weaving through the air like a siren song. "Please, just listen to me," I cried, reaching the child just as they took a hesitant step toward the water. "You don't understand. It wants to take you." The child blinked, uncertainty clouding their gaze. "But it's just water," they murmured, as if trying to rationalize the danger. I knelt before them, desperation clawing at my throat. "It's not just water. It's alive. It's hungry. You have to trust me." The child's eyes widened, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of understanding. "But my friends say it's safe." "Your friends are wrong," I insisted, urgency flooding my words. "You have to come away from here. Please." Just then, a loud crack echoed through the trees, and the ground trembled beneath us. The water surged violently, and I felt the darkness creeping in from the edges of my vision. The whispers intensified, a swirling cacophony that threatened to swallow us whole. "Stay with us. Join us." With a surge of fear, I grabbed the child's hand and yanked them back. "Run. We have to get away." We sprinted back toward the village, the whispers clawing at our minds, begging us to return. But I refused to look back. The darkness was closing in, and I would not let it take another innocent soul. When we reached the village, I could see the lights flickering in the windows, the villagers still oblivious to the danger lurking just beyond their doors. My heart raced as I pushed through the crowd, pulling the child close to me. "Listen. The lake is calling to you. It's dangerous." This time, the villagers turned to stare at us, the confusion slowly shifting to concern. "What happened?" one of them asked, eyes wide. "The lake, it's alive," I cried, the weight of my words pressing down on me. "We need to warn everyone. We can't let anyone else get taken." I could see doubt in their eyes, but I felt the urgency coursing through me. We had to make them believe. We had to unite against the darkness that threatened to consume us all. As I glanced back toward the lake, I saw the shadows shifting, the whispers growing louder, echoing through the trees. It was watching, waiting for its chance to strike. But I wouldn't let it win. We would gather together, face the darkness, and confront the truth of what lay beneath the surface. The villagers slowly began to murmur among themselves, glancing nervously toward the forest. I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. Perhaps together we could stand against the darkness. Perhaps we could save not only ourselves but everyone who had ever been drawn to the lake. That night, as the village gathered to hear our story, I felt the weight of the lake's presence bearing down on us. But I stood firm, knowing that we would face the echoes of the past together, united against the darkness that threatened to claim us all. Hope your dreams are filled with fear. Good night.